all I can say really simply is that it gives me absolute great pleasure to welcome Mr. Nile Rodgers.
Thank you. Thank you, Benji.
So my thanks on behalf of everyone in this room for taking the time out to talk to us today. We all really appreciate it. And of course, we all had a great time at the gig last night, right? Yeah.
What was that?
Yeah.
Come on. I had a fantastic time last night. It was amazing. The day before, we played in Manchester, and literally 1 hour after the gig, we were at the airport. So we had no sleep. Well, I slept on the plane. But to come out and play to the audience was fantastic, and it was exhilarating, exactly what we needed.
I'm pretty sure that there can be no one that's kind of musically aware that hasn't come into contact with one of your songs, one of your productions, one of your records. So with that said, we have a great deal of ground to cover today, and we're going to do our best to try and fit in as much as we can into 90 minutes, 2 hours. But I think, you know, having read your book and having been a fan of your music for so long, I think in this case, it is relevant to kind of start from the beginning. You know, much as I like to kind of weave my way around, it's, you know, I think in this case, it would be good to start from an early age, because you didn't really have what we would think of as a conventional upbringing, did you?
It depends on your, on the kind of people you hang out with. In my world, it was completely normal. My family, everybody in my immediate area of all the adults were all heroin addicts. My biological father, my stepfather, my mother eventually became one. Just everybody, all of our family, friends, and that's just the environment. What happened in America in the 50s, heroin became, I guess, some sort of chic drug in the ghetto. You know, prior to that, people were just getting, you know, booze and marijuana. Marijuana was sort of sexy, but heroin put you on another level, sort of, I guess, socially maybe. And the concept of being a junkie must have been cool, because my parents are pretty cool, and they wouldn't do shit that wasn't cool. So I guess they chose heroin because it was the thing to do. I mean, I don't really judge them for their drug usage and stuff, but the only problem is that heroin eventually made them a little bit more self-centered, I would imagine, than normal parents, because the act of procuring the drugs took so much time that it wasn't the same as just running down to the liquor store and buying booze. It's like you got to go cop and do the whole thing, and then you got to prepare it and cooking up, and the ritual of drug usage was serious.
And the reason that dovetails into our conversation about music so significantly is because of the sort of people that would be in and around in that scene, right? And the kind of music that they would be into and bring into your lives. Do you want to talk about that a little bit, and the Beatnik scene of the sort of late 50s in America?
Right. So, you know, because my mom and dad eventually, to supply themselves, they wound up dealing drugs. And once you're a dealer and you start getting interesting clients. And so a lot of famous jazz musicians would come to our house on a daily basis. I mean, on a regular basis. So I saw very famous people, which I didn't know they were that famous at the time. They were just people coming over to cop. But our house was a hotbed of artistic activity, a lot of artists, a lot of writers, a lot of musicians, and everybody was cool. Everybody spoke like, "Hey, my man, what's happening? Yeah, dig yourself. Well, look here, baby. Everything is not copacetic. You know what I'm saying? My man, little Nile, come here for a minute. Let me rap." I'm like 4 years old, and that's how they talked to me. They didn't go, they would never say, "Nile, don't do that." They would go, "My man, come here, young blood. Dig yourself." That meant, we're not going to discipline you. You need to be introspective and look into your own. It was like, all right already. So,
Yeah.
you know.
And so what kind of music was surrounding you at this point?
Jazz, modern jazz. It was and it was interesting. There was a difference between commercial jazz and modern jazz, especially in my household. So my parents liked the commercial stuff. They loved to go to the theater. They were really into that, but they loved bebop. They also loved avant-garde. So it was, I guess it depended upon the time of day. If we're in the daytime, they would listen to like Mel Torme and stuff like that. But at night, it turned into Monk, Miles, Bird and Diz, just hardcore bebop. So at night when they're nodding, it's like that. So that's just how it was. It wasn't, and it was not peculiar. When you read my book, the reason why I'm very romantic about them is because they were great. They really were great. From the standpoint of regular Americana, what you saw on television, they were definitely not like that. But it was the only existence I knew, and it was wonderful, and it was interesting, and it was inspirational. It was totally inspiring.
And do you want to talk a little bit about your stepfather, because or the man that raised you?
Yeah, my stepfather.
Your stepfather,
right?
Because that would go on to have quite an effect in your interpretation of the world, and also in many ways he was sort of one of the original. He was an OG hipster, really, in some ways. Yeah. I got from your book,
Right. Well, my stepfather is white, and in those days that was a big deal. I didn't know it was a big deal because he was just Bobby to me, and the reason why I called my father Bobby is because I called my mother Beverly. I called every adult that I knew by their first name, so it didn't. We were friends, even though he was my stepfather. All the adults around were my buddies, so we knew lots of Bobbies. But because my father was white, they called him White Bobby. So I called him White Bobby. Hey, White Bobby, But I didn't think of it as I didn't think of it as, hey, Bobby, the white man moving into my crib, fucking up my, it wasn't that. It was just White Bobby because there was Black Bobby and Gay Bobby and so Bobby and, that's just, And one day I went to school at 8 years old. I think is what my man is thinking of. And I'm in a classroom, and it was a rather big classroom. And we lived in a part of New York City called Alphabet City. This is when my parents couldn't afford the West Village. We moved to the East Village. And I heard all the kids in the classroom going, "Oh shit, his father is white. Oh shit, his father." And I didn't know that was a bad thing until I felt the kids who were predominantly Puerto Rican finding it either uncomfortable. I didn't know what the problem was, but there was clearly a problem at that point to them. And that was around the time my book sort of starts to pick up. It's when my father has his first overdose. That was Thanksgiving Day. And Thanksgiving in my life in America, Thanksgiving's a holiday. I don't know what the hell it represents, but what they tell us is the Americans the English settlers made friends with the Native American people, and they all ate dinner together. I was like, oh, yeah, right. And half of the people were dead from flu and stuff. But whatever. It's a very jovial, celebratory American holiday. But in my life, Thanksgiving wound up being tragic. And from that first overdose, our lives sort of spiraled out of control. And I became basically an adult, and I became responsible for sometimes everything. I was responsible for my own food, my own education, travel. And let me just say one thing that predates this event. I was born very sickly, so I was put in a convalescent home when I was young because I used to live in oxygen tents. I had asthma. And finally, when I moved to this children's home for about 5 to 6 months, they had a very robust early childhood development program. So I learned to read at an 8th grade level, far above children at my level. So when I got home, I could navigate through the waters of adulthood. Does everybody understand what I'm talking about? Does everybody speak English in here? Okay, cool. So I was not vulnerable to the things that a lot of other 6 and 7-year-olds would be vulnerable because I could read, and I could read very complicated, polysyllabic words, and I could understand compound thoughts. It wasn't just, don't do that, don't do this. It was, don't do that. Well, why not? I saw you do it. Well, we're an adult. Really? So you mean to tell me it's less dangerous for you than it is for me? Uh-oh. So that was my childhood. So people took that as me being rebellious, but in fact, I was just trying to learn, because if I see you do something, why can't I do it? So I wound up, this is to help you get to the fact that I started doing drugs myself at 11 years old, because it worked for them. I thought it would work for me too.
And as a sort of as a child adult that you'd become, you also, you're a native New Yorker, right?
Right.
But is it fair to say that you lived a kind of bi-coastal existence when you were young? So you had experience of both New York and the West Coast.
Correcto. Yes. What happened was my mother, when she had her second child, my mom had 3 coat hanger abortions, which were very dangerous. She almost died twice. So she, I guess, decided, well, I'm going to have the baby finally. So she had her second child, which was my brother. She had him 6 years later. And she started suffering from postpartum depression, where she threatened to kill my little brother every day because he couldn't stop crying. And the doctor told her that she wasn't fit to raise children. And so I was shipped off to California to live with her mother while she went to a mental hospital. She wasn't incarcerated, but she went to a psychiatrist every day. And that was my first trip to Los Angeles.
And this is early 60s, right? Would it be?
That was, dude, I'm even older than that. That was 1959.
Okay, so could you paint?
Just 59. Correct.
Cool. So could you paint us a kind of, like, just a picture of what New York, what Manhattan, and what LA felt like at that time, whether it be culturally, musically, or anything really?
He did read the book. So the deal is that when when we left New York, we took the bus all the way to Los Angeles, about 3,000 miles. It was a long trip. And when we arrived in Los Angeles, we were in downtown LA, which looks very much like New York. So in my child's mind, I thought that we had just drove around for a long time and wound up in the same place. Maybe we just came through the back door or something, the stage entrance to the bus terminal. So, but once we left the bus terminal, I noticed that Los Angeles was very different than New York, in that we had a very powerful Latin, a Mexican influence. And everything, was Overa, Figueroa, blah, 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 da, 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 da. And I was like going, damn, in New York, we had Puerto Ricans, but they were only in the movie West Side Story or in my family. They didn't have, like, things named. Now it's different. They'll have, like, Munoz Boulevard and blah, blah, blah. But then nothing was named after Puerto Ricans or anybody from Latin culture in New York City. But in Los Angeles, everything was. I mean, you had, we even had a place called Santa Ana, which was like, in my childhood memory, he was the villain of America. He fought Davy Crockett, but in L.A. So my childhood analytical brain thought, wow, California is cool. They like celebrate criminals, and it's fantastic. And they named streets and towns after them. And when you're a child and you're analyzing things are very black and white. Not to make a joke, but it's like, this is this and that's that, and the gray areas are not that clear yet. So LA felt like you could just do whatever you wanted to do because they sanctioned it. And I went pretty crazy because that year I had just turned 7. So yeah, you're right. At that point, it was 19. It was changing. It was still 1959. So anyway, I turned 7 years old, and at 7 years old, I set the national truancy record for the United States. When you go to, I went to Catholic school because of my grandmother. She was super Catholic. and I cut school 75 days in a row. And I thought they were going to give me like a plaque because I figured out how to do it. We used to have derelicts, winos who hung out in Los Angeles. They have liquor stores, right? You had to have a special store to buy liquor, and it was right across the street from my house. And the winos would lie out front and ask for money. So when you go to Catholic school, every day we had money to give to the church. I gave the money to the winos, and they would write letters for me. Please excuse Nile because his asthma, and So for 75 days, I got away with this.
And did you fall in love with music during those 75 days, or had that romance already started for you?
The music love had already started, but the real love was with cinema, was with movies and television. And I found that I could learn at a much faster rate by watching films, much faster than a classroom, which was rather sizable, probably half the amount of people in this room, maybe a little less. But our classrooms were really big, and we only had one teacher. But you go to a movie, and you're seeing Fellini, and we had no ratings then, so a child could see any film they wanted to see. So if you didn't understand it, too bad. But if you stayed there, because they didn't turn the theaters over in those days, you could just sit there and watch the same movies all the time. And in Los Angeles, they had what they call grindhouse format, which was 4 or 5, so I would sit there all day long and go, and finally you start learning a little Italian, a little Spanish, a little French, because it was, they just put subtitles, and you didn't know if you saw a movie called La Dolce Vita. Okay, cool, let me go see that. And you learned about Mastroianni and blah, 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 and Antonioni and whatever. And next thing I know, I was sort of smart, I guess. I was only 8 years old, 9 years old, but I knew everything, or at least I knew a lot about varied subjects. And when it came to music, I just adored music. My father was a professional percussionist, and as a result of the Latin music boom in America, he started playing with many of the big bands because they started having a Latin influence. So, and then if you couple that with the Beatnik culture, then that was the beginning of beat poetry, and they would always have a person playing bongos. So they make up. I'd like to believe that they were super intellectual, but every now and then it just sounded ridiculous to me. So the great thing about early beat poetry is that the profundity of absurd subject matter was so interesting to in other words, like they could say, my man with the red shoes, red, oh, red's like a bed, the bed is dead. And my dad would be going, red is dead, the shoes, the bed. It didn't rhyme. It didn't rhyme like that, but you know what I'm saying? It was more like, red, the color of my bed. What I said, the people, the thing. It was just weird. And I was like looking at him going, are you kidding me? You can get a job doing, but that was my world, and that was life, and it was wonderful to me.
It seems like, you can talk about like the Beatnik, beat poet generation, the Motown sort of 60s generation. Obviously, we'll get to the 70s and 80s. But, I mean, it feels, that your existence in New York and in LA as a young person sort of gave you the launch pad in a way to be able to throw yourself into show business. So in such a rounded way, is that a fair thing to say?
Yeah, let me try and speed up. So what happened was, after I did school for 75 days, they shipped me back to my mother. At that point, she had been cool. I guess the doctor says, okay, you can have kids now. So my mom had a third child. And instead of her raising that child, she gave that child to her aunt. So I have a brother that's really never been raised in our family. And when I came back to New York, I guess what happened was I just became completely inundated with culture, with music, with learning, and and I started playing in the school orchestras. And because I was always the last kid to enroll, the school orchestras would just assign you whatever instrument was lacking because no one could really play. I mean, can you remember like what 8-year-old bands used to sound like, or not? What difference does it make? It's like, give this dude a tuba. It's like, well, I'm all skinny and that's it. You're playing the sousaphone. You're playing, it's just like, and it would, and you just like, everything was just nothing but quarter notes and then like a rest or something, so really simple stuff. But it was fun. I loved the camaraderie of playing in bands and orchestras and moving from place to place. That was the one thing that allowed me to fit in no matter where I went. I guess we all stank together, and it was just very, very inspiring. But then I moved back to Los Angeles, and that's where things started to change for me dramatically. At that point, my mom had yet another kid, and so I moved back to LA with her because she was a heroin addict at that point, full day, everyday user, and she tried to kick. So she kicked on the bus. We get to LA, and then she moves back. Now I'm by myself with her, with my grandparents. And my grandmother had a boyfriend who worked at a very high-end airport. And at that airport was, Frank Sinatra, Ray Charles, Elvis Presley. And these are the kind of people that would fly in every day. And because I was the only kid working there, I don't know what the child labor laws were like, but kids had jobs when I was a kid. Like, you couldn't live without a job. And the cool thing about a kid's job is you get to keep all your money. So I worked at the airport, which was fantastic. And all of these people in show business were generous as hell. And probably this was the first time that being black had a huge advantage because I stood out. I'd walk up there and everybody was cool to me. Like, hey, kid, here's $5, wash the plane, get the windshield. I'm this little skinny dude, and everybody was generous. Frank Sinatra was incredible tipper, man. He $50, like, I could go buy the world.
So is this your first encounter with celebrity, basically?
No, because they were around me all during my childhood when my parents were drug dealing. But this is my first encounter where I knew that they were stars. Like when I was younger, they were just people coming over to buy drugs or something, or trade, barter. But when I worked at the airport, I was 11, 12, 13 years old. So now I had seen all these people in movies. I mean, imagine me living in a movie theater and then you see like Ginger Rogers walking up to you like, damn, do that song. And they used to love the fact that I knew all their stuff. Like I could talk to, I remember once I had unfortunately it's not in the book because I didn't have enough time to go into it, but I remember once having a whole conversation with Dean Martin and like we were singing the songs and the lyrics of like some obscure film and he was happy that I knew it. It was like, wow, you saw that? And I'm like, it's funny, like, big movie stars are just as fragile. You see them getting off of a jet and you say, man, I love that movie, Three Sailors and a Girl. Wow, you saw Three Sailors and a Girl?
What was Frank's jet like?
Frank's jet was a Learjet, and this was the early age of the jet age, the private jet age at commercial aviation. And it was a Learjet, and it was called the Christina II. And I didn't even figure it out until I wrote this book. Actually, truthfully, bro, I didn't figure it out until a couple of days ago when I was talking to a person. I was like at the airport, I always wondered, where the hell is the Christina I? Christina I was his daughter. I was like, damn it, Nile, you idiot. I just figured it out the other day. The plane was called the Christina II, but his daughter was Christina Sinatra. Duh, Christina I. So I used to clean the Christina II, and the tail number almost looked like my name, which was cool. And especially I stood to the side, and I would pretend like it's my jet, Nile, on the Christina II. And Frank Sinatra, you fast forward into the future, Quincy Jones was producing a Frank Sinatra record. And this was the early age of the Sony digital tape recorder, and I was the only person in New York who owned one, and they had to rent it from me. So that way, I got to go protect my machine, but mainly I wanted to hang with Q and Frank. So, and it's funny, I still call them Mr. Sinatra even though they are renting my shit, right? So I walk into the room, and I like, Mr. Sinatra, yes. And he was like all wrapped up in what they were doing. And I said, I'm Pud, which was my nickname, which is what everybody called me. And he says, Pud? I said, yeah, I'm Pud from Van Nuys Airport. And he went, oh my God. And then they, it was the most cool thing that's probably ever happened to me since I've been in the music business. And we were sitting there and Frank Sinatra, when he does a recording, everything has to be perfect. Like he's got to sing it right, the band's got to play it right. So people who were doing Frank Sinatra records loved it because if he made one mistake, they get paid because they get to do it again and again and again. And that's just how he recorded. There was no such thing as an overdub and none of that. Like, I was watching Q going, hey, Frank, come on, we'll just punch it in. It was like, punch it in, I'll punch you out. So, I think that he took sort of pride in watching and like seeing that I grew up to be that guy that now I'm in charge. And also to show you how my life is very, very weird and you could see the pattern. I have this ironic thing in my life. I always have something really good happen and something really bad happen, but everything seems to be connected. So Christina Sinatra is the person who named the first band that I was in with Bernard Edwards called New York City because she was married to the dude who owned the record label. And that's how we became New York City. She looked at like New York Magazine or something like that. And even though it was a Philly sound band, she says, hey, let's call the group New York City. And that's how we became the Big Apple Band, which went on to become Chic.
So we're in the 60s, you've cleaned Frank's jet and you've spent some time in New York and LA and obviously you've been around music, but tell me about developing your own musical taste and getting into music that you started to love yourself.
So I have to say that primarily I think of myself as a jazz person. I mean, that's what I still play in my spare time. Rich will tell you when I'm around the house, you never hear me practicing like Hendrix or you don't hear me practicing funk. I don't have to practice that. It's in me now. I'm a funk guy. I think like a funk guy. But what I always practice, what we used to call woodshedding, is I still just sit around practicing, sometimes I can get it that fast. But still, I'm just like a bebop guy, and that's all I want to play. Matter of fact, Rich and I were, a couple of weeks ago, we were transcribing Eric Dolphy. Wow. It's like at this age, I'm still transcribing Eric Dolphy, when I met Bernard Edwards, that was when my life shifted. Because Bernard Edwards, he and I were polar opposites. But from the first day we played together, we were never apart. Ever. I mean, really, even when we broke up, we were all pissed off at each other. The way that people in Chic get pissed off, or at least the way me and Bernard get pissed off, is like, motherfucker. And then you call them and go, hey, man, you feel like going? Okay, cool. It's like, so like, and if Bernard heard somebody, say something, disparaging about me, he would say, hey, man, I can say that shit, but you can't. It was like, so we always were like this. Anyway, Bernard, when I met him, we were on a pickup gig, and in those days, you basically just did what was ever on the jukebox, whatever was hot. And in those days, a lot of jazz records were popular in R&B settings. They were, Freddie Hubbard had Red Clay, and Headhunters, Herbie Hancock. I mean, it was jazz artists on the R&B charts and the dance charts. So what happened is, we learned those songs. So, one night they would say, okay, man, we're doing Song for My Father. And then next, right behind it, they say, we're doing Sissy Strut. And right behind it, they say, who's going to take the weight? And so. So, oops. Disregard my cell phone. I'll turn it off after it stops. So I started to learn to love R&B because many of the gigs that we did were primarily R&B gigs. Unfortunately, all the jazz dudes, myself included, we used to sort of look upon those gigs with a certain amount of disdain. We used to call them boogaloo gigs, and boogaloo it wasn't. Oh, come on already! It's my mom. But anyway,
her ears were burning.
Yeah, it's true. Like I was hit with cancer like around a year ago, and now my mom calls me every day, and I go, Mom, all right already. They don't give you a test every day. So anyway, so what happened was we were doing a bunch of boogaloo gigs. The main one was with New York City, and somehow the opening act had lost their equipment, and the kid who was playing in the band before us played on my amplifier because his was stolen, and something miraculous happened that night. All along, Bernard had been telling me to sell my big jazz guitar, which was feeding back and stuff, and I had to play at low volumes. And we didn't have the great sound men that we have now. Usually, the sound on the stage was what people heard in the audience. And so I had to play quietly because my guitar would feed back through these big amps because we wanted to look like Sly and the Family Stone. But meanwhile, I couldn't play at that volume. So this kid borrowed my amp, and he was playing a Fender Strat. And damn, all of a sudden my amplifier sounded like it was the most incredible amplifier I'd ever heard. And Bernard just looked at me. He was on stage going, "That's what I've been trying to tell you. Buy a Strat, buy a Strat." So I buy the Stratocaster, and now it feels weird. The strings were light compared to my big fat jazz guitar. But I got $300 back, too. I traded my jazz guitar and got 3 bills. It's like, man, this is cool. And Bernard then showed me the style of guitar playing that kid was playing. Because we were playing some of the same songs, but his playing sounded better than mine. And Bernard picked up my guitar and started chucking, playing the same songs that we had been playing, but now he showed me how to play the song. And I was like, wow, really? And Bernard was like a regular guitar player. I mean, he was a good guitar player, but nothing spectacular. But he sounded better than me, and he sounded really cool. And the reason why was because he would hold the chord and play, guitar players, usually when they know a chord, that's the chord. If they play E chord, they play the E chord, and maybe they know another way of playing it. But that's it. So whenever they play a song, it's just the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over again, and that's what they call playing a song. When I play a song, I'm like moving the chords all around and inverting it and voice leading and all this stuff. And when Bernard did that, and he was just playing the song, but it sounded more interesting, I noticed that he was jumping around the strings. He would hold the position, but then move all across the fingerboard. And I was like going, damn, if you could do that with one position, what would I be able to do? I know it all up and down the neck, and I could put it anywhere. I could pick out random notes and just play the extensions and never even touch the root or the fifth and all that other stuff. What would I be able to do? So I moved into the bathroom for about 4 or 5 days while the guy who was on the road with me, he was had like a million girls coming in and out, and I would stay in the bathroom every day and just practice. And then about a week later, maybe I emerged as the guy that pretty much I am now, which is a funk guy who can play a bunch of chords and melodies at the same time.
We should make it clear, Bernard, who you're referring to, your long-time musical partner, was a bass player, and of course you...
A genius bass player,
A genius
by the way.
bass player. And of course, we all know that guitar is your weapon of choice. When did you first discover when did you decide on the guitar? As a jazz person, when did you decide you wanted to pick up the guitar?
The last time that I moved back to New York, after my grandmother had died, I was about 15, 16 years old. I was playing the clarinet with the school orchestra. And at the time, we sucked, but it was okay. We played okay. But we thought we sounded amazing. But, we were just in junior high school. So I had gone out one night with my friend. We were still big glue sniffers. I'm not sure I mentioned that, but that was my drug of choice. I was a glue sniffer, and we used to sniff amyl nitrate, and that was like heaven to us. The glue we paid for, the amyl nitrate, we'd break into the school and get free. And one day we were going to the skating rink in Los Angeles, and we ran into these guys that were what people wound up calling hippies. But when we saw them, we asked them, well, man, we've never seen guys look like you. They had hair down in their faces. And we're like, what are you guys? And they said that we were freaks. I was like, wow, freaks, cool. I'm down with that. And the freaks asked me and my boy, now imagine this, we were like 15-year-old kids. So you know how when you're a kid, you sort of dress like the artist that you idolize? Like I remember when Madonna hit, all these little girls were like with the rubber bracelets and stuff, and they're like 10 years old and stuff. So we were that. We idolized the Temptations. So we were 15 years old, and we had shark skin suits with ruffled shirts and French collars going to the skating rink. I mean, that's how 15-year-old, and we were the shit. So we met these freaks, and we thought they looked weird, and we could just imagine what they thought of us, because we were like clean. And they asked us if we wanted to take a trip. We said, absolutely. We had no idea that they meant to take LSD. We thought they meant go joyriding, because that's what we did when we took a trip. We went to the beach. And so we went up to the Hollywood Hills, and they gave us LSD. Whoa. And we didn't even know what LSD was. I didn't return home for like 2 days. My like sharkskin suit was all dirty and tattered, and my roller skates were like all psychedelic and shit, you know, where like girls had like painted, ooh, spade cats with roller skates and suits, and they were like painting all over us and stuff, and we were like into it. So at that, I had left being completely into nothing but Motown and R&B and like the deepest soul that you could hear on the radio. And when I came home, I was saying to my grandmother, I was talking completely different in just 2 days. I was like, oh, Granny, like, wow, you're hassling my head, man, you know. Must you play the Mighty Sparrow again, you know, or whatever. I don't think Mighty Sparrow was around, but, you know, she was like in the, you know, Caribbean music and stuff and gospel. I was like, oh, no, man, you know. I must hear the Monkees, you know, I have to hear them. I have to hear the Trogs. So my grandmother died shortly after, and I went back to New York to live with my mom. And but before I got with my mom, I was with my uncle, and his girlfriend had a daughter who was like the finest woman that ever walked this earth. And she had a band, and the band didn't have a guitar player. So she says to me, Nile, we need a guitar player in our band. Do you think you could play it? I was like, of course. I had never touched a guitar in my life, but because in the old school orchestra, they just give you the instrument and say, okay, play this, and within a couple of weeks you go. So, but this band was actually pretty good, and they wanted me to play guitar on that level. At the time, I had been playing clarinet in the school orchestra, and it has the same written range as the guitar, like the low E on the clarinet. I looked at the music, I went, psh, I got this guitar shit covered. This is great. So I look at the music, and I don't remember what song it was that they had written out, but I couldn't figure it out to save my life. I embarrassed myself, and the girl said something harsh to me, and I moved in with my mom. I just couldn't even face her anymore. And then I kept practicing. I bought a Beatles songbook because I couldn't get my clarinet etudes to speak properly. I was trying, and it just didn't make sense. And I looked at the fingering, and it wasn't working. You know, something was wrong. So I bought a Beatles songbook because, you know, man, I was into the Beatles then, you know, like so. And my favorite song was A Day in the Life, and I just kept playing it over and over and over again. And I had the fingering down because I memorized it, but it never sounded quite like A Day in the Life. It was weird. So my mother's boyfriend at the time came over, and he realized that I had the guitar out of tune. I guess I missed that part in the book. You know, I just went right to the songs, you know, like forget about the tuning part. I tuned it to sound like a violin or something in the classical orchestra. Oh, man. I'm so long-winded, the battery's running out. So anyway, the dude tuned the guitar, and after he tuned it, I played the exact same fingering that I had been playing, and it was heaven. It was, I can't even explain it. It was completely euphoria. It was like the first time I ever got high or had sex. It was that level of unbelievable magic. And I played the chord, and it was perfect. And then I attempted to sing, because the lyrics are in the songbook, and I went, boom. I read the news today, oh boy. Boom, 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 boom. About a lucky man who made the grade. Boom, 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 boom. And I was like, shit. I was so high. Obviously, it was really slow. It was like, boom. I read. But you know what I'm saying? I got through the song. And at that point, I decided I'm never going to play another instrument again, seriously, but the guitar. I'm going to concentrate, stick to this thing, get it down, get it down, get it down. And that's when I became the jazz guy. And then, so we went back. And then blah, 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 blah. And then I meet Bernard Edwards, and he said, chuck in, buy a Strat, blah, blah, blah. We get a record deal. First song we write
Hold up. But one thing that we should talk about that's quite interesting is obviously you went to LA, and it's fair to say you won't be offended if I say you came back a bit of a hippie, right? You came back a hippie.
Offended? I wore that like a red badge of courage.
Yeah. And what's interesting to me is that you talk about, the jazz heritage and being a Temptations fan and being obsessed with that whole era. And then, but when you met Bernard, you were actually the kind of hippie guy, and he was the R&B guy. Is that right?
Completely, 100%. Bernard was, so old school R&B. He really fit in where I did not fit in. My first job, like professional kind of real job where you got a paycheck and taxes taken out, was with Sesame Street. And I got that gig because I just auditioned and got the gig. They didn't really care. It's like, can you read the music? Can you cut the gig? Blah, blah, blah. I got the gig. They didn't pay attention to the fact that I had green hair and cornrows and stuff like that. And then when I'd undo the cornrows, I'd have this big sort of green afro. And it wasn't green like that, because we didn't have that kind of color in those days. What we would do is we would use food color, food coloring a vegetable day, like you make cupcakes green, like St. Patrick's Day, the cupcakes are green. And, so we would take that and we put it in our hair and leave it in for like hours and hours and hours, and then it would be green, but my hair looked really black. But when you get in the light, you say, holy shit, he's got green hair. So in Sesame Street, that was sort of cool. They liked it, and that was fantastic. And I only did that gig for a year because the guy who had vacated that gig was Carlos Alomar, and he went to play in the Apollo Theater house band. Then David Bowie hired Carlos Alomar and all my other buddies, Luther Vandross and those guys, and they became the Young Americans. And there was an opening at the Apollo, and I auditioned for that. It wasn't much of an audition. I was recommended by the woman from Sesame Street whose husband was the manager of the Apollo Theater at the time. And I got the gig at the house band, which was a guy, I think it was Reuben Phillips and King Curtis would switch off as the directors. And she told them that there was this really great guitar player who was a fantastic reader, because in those days, the Apollo Theater, we had, it was either 2 shows a day for certain, and it may have even been 3. And it would turn over like that. So it was a review format. Every now and then they'd have one band that would do a bunch of songs, but typically, in R&B, it was one-hit wonders. So a person would come out and they'd do their 1 or 2 songs that were hitting, and the next thing you know, the next. So everything that the audience got were songs that were pretty familiar, and everybody had their little routine and shtick, but it just came on like that. So the band had to be ready for anything that was to be performed.
At this point, had James Brown already recorded the Apollo record?
Oh, yeah. You mean live at the Apollo?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So, when you were walking into that venue on 125th Street, were you already walking in with this sort of pressure on your shoulders of knowing what amazing stuff had already been recorded there? Not
only that, I had even known that... I had already heard about Jimi Hendrix winning the talent show. First of all, don't get me wrong. Even though I was a jazzy guy, everybody went to the Apollo every now and then. Like a lot of the bands that I was playing with, that I subbed with, would wind up playing at the Apollo. So it wasn't like when I got the gig as the house band guy, I had never been to the Apollo. Luther Vandross was my friend, and he took us to the Apollo to see Patti LaBelle and the Bluebells. And I never saw anything like that. So it was our place to hang on a level. So
you've been in the audience section. Can you describe what it feels like to? Because it was famously a very unforgiving crowd that would go to the Apollo, right? They would not suffer fools gladly there. So how did it feel when you walked out on stage and had to look out at the unforgiving R&B sort of thumbs up or thumbs down audience?
Well, I was lucky in that the very first show that I played at the Apollo, the very first time I was on the stage in the band, this is what happened to me. I get recommended by the woman from Sesame Street, and she says, oh, this kid is amazing. He can do anything. He can read whatever you put in front of him, blah, 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 blah. So I go and I do the audition, and the audition was Betty Wright's Cleanup Woman, which is in F sharp, and it's like 30 pages long. Not 30, but at least 15 or 16 pages. You have to 3 music stands and tape them together and keep pulling that shit up, the other side, and it's just vamping. But of course, I play because I didn't understand the R&B thing yet. I didn't have it down. But you get the chart, and they go, all right, come on, here we go, 2, 3, and we're jamming this, and so the leader of the band tells me I don't have to make the rest of the audition because, wow, that was so incredible. You played Clean Up Woman for 13 pages, so you're the man. So they let me go, and I just go walking around Harlem, and they tell me to be back an hour before showtime because at the Apollo, I don't know if they still do this. You guys play it. Do they still go, the half is in? Do they still do that anymore? No, they don't do that. All right, that's real old school. But they used to go, the half is in. It was like this diving klaxon. The half is in, the half is in. And we'd all like run around and get ready to play. So I'm sitting first chair because it's like a couple of guitar players. I'm sitting there. And what happened, we're ready to go on stage. And I'm so focused because I want to do a great job because I know this is the Apollo. I got to smoke. I don't want to lose this job. I'm getting $375 a week plus. I need to do this. So anyway, I didn't pay attention that they had rolled a coffin in, a casket, a coffin on the side of the stage, like almost right in front of me because I'm sitting here looking at the conductor, and this coffin comes over. And I'm looking at my man, and he goes, bang. And as soon as he does that, curtain opens, and this coffin opens, and it's Screaming Jay Hawkins. I don't know if you've ever seen his routine, but Screaming Jay has got this looking like a skeleton, and he's got this rattle in his hand. And I'm terrified because it just happens at the exact moment, like on the downbeat. Bam! And we're like playing in 6/8, dun, 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 and then we go, dun, we got the pickup go, dun, 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 bam, ah! And I jump up, and I grab my guitar like this. I grab the cable out, and I'm running around with this big jazz guitar running across the stage, and Screaming is running after me. And I'm running, and I run stage right, but now it's like they're blocking me because all the people waiting to go on are standing over there, so I can't get up. And then I run to the other side, and the audience is crying because they know it's totally real. It wasn't set up. And now, meanwhile, the shit that made it really funny, especially to my friends, is like at that time, I was like a young kung fu master. It was like I was studying, Lawhorn kung fu and Hungar kung fu, and I was like down. And like meanwhile, now I'm running across the stage like a total chump. I am terror. And the audience at the Apollo, as y'all know, they were like, yeah! When I finally come back, and Screamin' Jay just nailed the performance that night. And at that point, the old school guys in the band just decided, let's teach this young blood what it's all about. And that was my first day. So I knew how, and it was like everybody was down on this. Like everybody was in it. It couldn't have happened if they hadn't planned it. Like me not having to do rehearsal, they just wanted to show me what the Apollo was really like. So trial by fire.
So how do we go from that first experience, initiation experience, to you eventually starting your own band, your first band?
Well, at that point, I had already been playing with Bernard Edwards, another jazz guy named Harold Alexander, another guy named Guylan Kane, who was in a group called The Last Poets. So I was gigging. I was already gigging in New York, and I had lots of other gigs. But I always tried to bring Bernard in on all my gigs because it just sounded better. I don't know, and he did the same thing. So finally, Bernard landed the gig.
Why was that? What was it about your relationship with him that made you first click?
We wanted to be professional. In those days, like a lot of bands were sloppy, and even though you were playing in the hood at really, like dives, what we used to call the Chitlin circuit, people expected good shows. I mean, we had to go. Think about this. We had to show up in a bar in the hood with like uniforms and stuff, and people would have capes with, you see those people who jump off of mountains and they fly. I was in a band called the Metaphors, and they used to have those kind of things back then, and like flying, they were like bats and stuff. And they did that because we'd get like a little black light, and these things were white underneath, and they do the choreography, and they go, pow, 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 and that, boom, doo, doo, fa, boom, 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 boom. whoop, and the girl, and they would do that, and those white things would be, so, that's what they expected in the hood, in the ghetto. And we were getting $15 a night, and we have to do 4 and 5 sets. But they expected a show. And Bernard and I always wanted to be good. So a lot of guys would just get through the gig because they figured they'd never be, they'd never get back again. And what difference does it make? It's just a boogaloo gig. But Bernard and I had a powerful work ethic, and we always wanted the shows to be great. And if he didn't know something, I would tell him if I didn't know it, and we just kept the band together. We were band leaders, and we didn't know it.
I mean, it's interesting because, often the rhythm section, i.e. the drums and the bass, can be like the heartbeat of a band. But it's really interesting for us to hear you talk about the relationship between lead guitar and bass and why that was such a solid relationship.
Well, it's funny. I recently posted on my blog. So I talk about it like everybody knows everything. So a year ago, I was stricken with cancer, and I didn't really know what to do. So I got all paranoid and stuff, and I tried to reach out to people, but no one wanted to talk about it. So I started a daily blog to just talk about it, to find people, figuring that if they were anonymous, they would talk about it and open up. And it wound up becoming just everything I do every day. So about a week and a half ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, a friend of mine that I haven't seen for years found an early videotape of me and Bernard and the band that eventually became Chic. And you could tell from that tape how we clicked. I mean, we carried this thing, and it was basically, we could have just been a trio. The other cat was really great, but it was 5 of us, but it was 2 guitars, bass, and drums, and a lead singer. And when you hear the songs, I defy anybody to tell me that it does not sound like the songs Earth, Wind, and Fire, Get Away with horns and all that stuff, but we didn't need horns. We had it. We had it in the parts. And that's what people were used to in the hood. If it didn't sound like the record, you would get booed. So, when a song would start, it'd have to go, and everybody would learn the records, and we would do that. It was tight. So Bernard and I were responsible for the melodic, the harmonic, and the bass part. The drummers, we figured they would learn the grooves, and we thought about everything as a duo, and that we could go make everybody's gigs good. Because if he and I showed up, you got it covered. We got the songs covered, we got the licks covered, we got all that stuff, and basically that's why we were so tight.
And it's interesting because obviously that will go on to become important, what with the grooves of Chic, and you talking about performing like the record is sort of in conflict with your jazz roots of improvising and that freeness. It's interesting to have the discipline just to perform it exactly as people expect it on the record instead of being free.
But the one thing you have to understand is that the truth is that, yes, we perform it exactly like the record, but not exactly enough that the people in the audience feel like they're hearing the song and they're not disappointed. If you look at music nowadays, when you go to a live show is almost, I hate to say it, almost every case, it's exactly the record because they're just playing the damn record. So they're playing the record and like lip syncing and dancing and stuff because that's what people have become accustomed to, is seeing the thing and hearing the thing sound exactly the same. So what we do is, it's the song, but we're musicians, so we want to have a good time. I can't just do. It's not like a symphony orchestra where we have to play the exact thing, but we do make it feel like the record. And like when you see us play live, we fool around, but we want. It's not about us. It's about you guys. So we want to make you happy, but we can't make you happy over and over and over again if we don't feel good too.
So you described, actually, just set the scene. Describe Bernard and how he looked, and describe how you look.
When? It all depends on when.
At the point where you first came together and he was a bit more leaning towards the slick R&B side and you were leaning more towards the hippie side.
The night that I met him, I was wearing hand-embroidered jeans with patches on them, which I had done myself. I was all thrilled about it. Gigantic bell bottoms, and I was the skinniest guy in the world. So gigantic bell bottoms with hip hugger. The zipper literally is just that long. They're riding way low. Huge platform shoes, because at that point I had done a bunch of gigs and I made a lot of money. So I went out and bought snakeskin platforms. I was like 6'5", you know. And Bernard, on the other hand, was wearing these knit shirts that they used to wear back in the hood, and silk trousers with the flaps on the back from a joint in Harlem called Mr. Tony's, probably not open anymore, and wearing shoes called Playboys, which look like hush puppies, and they got an extra thick sole. You know what Playboys are? Y'all know Plays? And we say, so the shirts were called Blighs. He would wear Blighs and Plays and sharkskin pants from Mr. Tony's flapped up, as they would say. Flap them up for me, Mr. Tony.
And so you were sort of suggesting earlier that he was trying to get you to loosen up, and you were talking about chucking on the guitar. Can you show us what you mean by chucking?
Oh, I'd be happy to.
Good.
8.5 minutes, we walk into this club, and my boy is playing this. That's the only vocals on the record, is that chorus, and the people lose their minds. As soon as the opening drum bit, right, because it goes, and as soon as that happens, everybody in the club, swear to God, went, "Ow!" And they all ran out to the dance floor, and they were out there. I don't remember what dance they were doing in those days. It was probably the rock or something. They were probably, it was all these people out there, "Ow!" And they were like doing this. They were like playing air bass and stuff like that, and they were like, and like they were all jamming, and this went on for an hour. And I had never seen anything like that. And I realized the power of a groove and the power of the DJ to talk to the audience just through your groove record. And it had nothing to do with the radio. It had something to do with just being in the environment, hitting them with something that moved you in the soul, moved you in the feet, moved your heart. And all of a sudden, we really believed in ourselves. We thought, damn, if they like that, what if we develop more stuff? And after everybody danced, it took about maybe almost a year, or maybe not quite a year, but it took a long time before we got record companies to believe in us. And even though we would take people down, A&R people, and show them that reaction and say, look, this is not staged, this is real. I mean, the DJ would play the record for an hour at a time. He had made 2 acetates that he would go back and forth and play for an hour, and they were like crazy. So, but the A&R people didn't quite understand it. They didn't understand all those repetitive breakdowns and all that stuff, and basically just an instrumental track. So a few months later, Bernard was hired to do a record, and they had to have a B-side to sell it commercially. And the B-side of the record, a lot of times the producers would just give you some money and say, okay, man, here's the money, cool, and I'll finish the song later. And then they'd write the song, and they become the writers. And basically, you do your track, and then they finish it later because it was a filler song. It's funny, there are a lot of filler songs in history that have become huge. I Will Survive was a B song, right? So Gloria Gaynor's biggest song was I Will Survive, and it was like she hated it. Like, oh, man, it was a B-side. So we cut Bernard. I wasn't on the session, so Bernard cut this B-side, and it was basically what would become Dance, Dance, Dance. Since I was the only writer with Chic at the time, the guy who had produced the session called me up to write it with him. And yes?
Before we go there, I think we should listen to the $10 record.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, let's listen to it. But while we do that, please say...
Format. Sorry. Okay.
No, it's all good. It's all good. I just want to hear the what you did that day.
Okay, cool. That's great.
But please say thank you to Mr. Rodgers for the guitar demonstration. So, but I've only got the version with the vocal, right? Which is...
That's okay.
This is not the original. Okay, so this is the tune from... that you saw in the club, right? Which tune?
Everybody
Dance, yeah. And the B-side would be Dance, 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 right?
No, it's, you didn't let me get there yet.
Okay.
Here you go. We didn't, ouch. We didn't get a record deal from this. They didn't understand it. We didn't get the record deal until we did Dance, Dance, Dance. So the reason why this song now has lyrics is because after we got the album, after we got the singles deal for Dance, 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 it was a hit. And then they said to us, okay, we're going to exercise your option and give you an album deal. So we wrote an album in 3 days and recorded it, and we put lyrics on Everybody Dance, which is how it became a full vocal song.
Okay, so basically, and this is the classic bass line, right?
This is an unbelievable. We never changed the music. We just put lyrics on top of it. That's why the girl testing, the girl whose voice you hear singing the lead vocal, it's very distinctive. You notice that when the chorus comes in, that voice goes away. That voice was never, we hired her after we had already had a hit record. So we didn't know Norma Jean Wright yet. As a matter of fact, she wasn't even called Norma Jean Wright. She was called Norma Wright. And we was like going, damn, that sounds like the Watts 103rd Street Rhythm Band. So we had her put her middle name in, which made it sound more sophisticated and sound like Marilyn Monroe, who actually I had seen many times because she got her first job working at Van Nuys Airport, like me.
Wow.
Marilyn Monroe used to work at the Van Nuys Airport, like I think at Lockheed, like a riveter or something like that.
So I'm sorry I interrupted you before.
No,
you're
it's
about to say about you needed, in order to make the record really speak to record label people, even though it was a hit in the clubs, you thought you needed to come up with a B-side.
Right, but I think I'm telling it wrong. You know, or you misunderstood. So Everybody Dance did not get us the record deal. That just was happening in the nightclubs, and it was jamming, and no matter what I tried to do to tell them how great it was, they didn't get it. So Kenny Lehman, the guy who also found the videotapes of us playing that you can see on my website, Kenny Lehman was a record producer, and he hired Bernard to play on a B-side of a record that they had performed. And Kenny then came to me to write that song as an A-side. And what happened was that song was called Dance, Dance, Dance. And when I first started writing, I remember Bernard Edwards had never written a song yet. So Kenny Lehman brought Dance, Dance, Dance to me, and I heard the bass line. I was like going, wait a minute, that's Bernard playing. There's no one else in the world that plays like that. And he says, yeah, well, you know, it was just a thing I did for this record, blah, 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 blah. And I says, look, we should bring Bernard back in because at that point, there was nothing there but bass and drums, and I think one keyboard player. Maybe not. Yeah, it was a keyboard player. So it was bass, drums, and a keyboard player, and that was all that was there. So I played guitar on it, and then I wrote the song. So I thought. I wrote, hang on one second. So when he brought it to me, it was just a bass line. I can't even play today. And then so I put on top of it, also, you see, when you're in the studio, when I'm in the studio, I play very differently. Like when the way I'm playing it now is the way I play it live. But in the studio, I actually just go. All tight and shit. It's like, but live I play. So that became dance, 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 dance. But that's not what I wrote. I just dance, 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 dance all of the time. I just dance, dance, dance all the time. Bernard came in and went, yo, my man, why is that so complicated? And I went, what do you mean? He went, why are you saying all that? Why don't we just say dance, dance, dance? Now, Bernard had never written a song before. And I went, what do you mean by dance, dance, dance? So he heard that I had written. So the song was just all the extensions. It never went to the root. It never went to F. So it's just, sorry, it's to the seventh. So it was all of those notes. So Bernard stayed there in that mood. He just said, why don't we just go? And then go. And I was like going, so he just went, dance, 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 keep on dancing, dance, 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 dance. And I was like, wow, okay. That sounds pretty good. And then what happens when you listen to the record, the part that I wrote as the hook is like now relegated to a secondary position, a secondary role on a micro move, which is my man going, ka-ding, ding, 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 ding. We have this counterpoint going across the melody when we're going, ooh, what a treat, feels so sweet. that body, ding, 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 ding. And he's like, you know, because I'm just a complicated guy. But when Bernard did that, it was so precise and so right on the money. I made him my songwriting partner from that moment on. And the way that our partnership developed was we never had to be equal as far as the amount of words. We never sat around and go, well, I wrote 30% of it, I wrote 25% of that. We just actually said that day, we're partners, and that was it. It was done. It didn't make any difference whether he started the song or he wrote the song, because him changing that hook just to that changed my whole song. Had it not been that, I don't think we would have gotten a record deal with the complicated thing I wrote. Maybe we would have, but so that's the record that we finished, and that's the record we submitted. You should play that, because it just shows you the genius of Bernard Edwards' power to arrange. That's the main reason why. Thank you. That's the main reason why these songs never get boring to us, because we never play it the same way. I mean, it's all over the map, but it still sounds like Dance 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 whenever we play it. But it's that jazziness, that freedom that's built into the composition. It's on the record like that. But I don't, like, now when I listen to it, I can remember where they are, but when I'm playing it, I have no idea where all those inversions go, and it's not even fun for me to remember. It's actually more fun to do it the way I do it.
And for those of us that are not sure what you mean when you say inversions, could you describe that?
Okay, so typically, and this is no disrespect, but I'm just saying, usually when a guitar player, when I was a kid, if a person taught me a chord, that was the chord. So Dance 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 is F minor 7 to B flat 7. Is the basic thing, but that already doesn't sound cool, right? So I make it a B flat 13, and now it'll sound more like Dance Dance Dance. Right? So the difference between going and or, that's fucking lame. Wow. Wow. It just kills me to do it. So it's B flat 7, B flat 13. I'm sorry, F minor 7 to B flat 13. Or so when I say inversion, so that's an F minor 7, that's an F minor 7, that's an F minor 7. My favorite. So that's also an F minor 7. It's just no fifth in it. It's just the 1, 3, and the 7. So normally, if you're a guitar player and you learn a song and it's, that's what you play the whole record. But I only do that in the intro to establish the harmony. And then when I start playing the song, I go. Anything I want that's sort of harmonically reflective of F minor 7, F minor 11. I'll even go weird like that every now and then. I'll go. Which is cool. It's all right in Chic. Yes, you can get away with it. We do it all. I do it all the time. I'll go. So, and that's what makes it Chic.
There you go. Grab that. So the record we just listened to finally got released by Atlantic, is that right?
Yeah, so after we put this out, this record became a big hit. And then they picked up our option and said, okay, you got to have an album. And being smart marketers, they knew that we had to follow this record really quickly. We had already had Everybody Dance recorded, but the way that we played it in the disco. So then we went out to hire people because we didn't have anybody hired because this was all studio friends. And we met Norma Jean. We had her change her name. Well, we didn't have her change her name to make the record, but we made the record real fast. And we came up with this concept for the album. It's a long story, but it was a combination between Roxy Music and Kiss. And we came up with this album.
And what year are we talking at the moment?
Ooh, my God, 1977.
Okay, so, I mean, the reason it's relevant to talk about Atlantic Records at this point is because pretty much everyone in this room is either involved with or looking to be involved with the music industry. And the music industry that they're entering in 2011 is pretty different to the one of 1979. That was, Can you describe the process of the money and the power that they had at their disposal to get these 12-inch records out?
The interesting thing about our record, when we came into the record company with Dance Dance Dance, we had already gotten signed to another record label, believe it or not. And we were in billboards signing and the whole thing. We were wearing suits and, but what happened is the label that we signed to was fundamentally bankrupt. They were notorious for not paying royalties and not paying their accountants. I mean, I'm not giving you news here. This is well documented. So contractually, we had them bound to have our record on the streets by a certain date because they had this Billboard disco convention coming up. And we thought that would be the best way to break our record because we'd be in a room full of DJs. The only people we trusted in those days were DJs. We didn't trust the radio people because we knew that we just didn't know anything about radio. But we knew DJs had the power to at least make a few hundred people a night go, woo! And that was fine with us. So we figured if we go to this disco convention with all DJs and they played our record, maybe we can get 20 or 30 DJs to play it and replicate what had just happened at that other club. So the record company we were signed to was called Buddha. Buddha didn't meet their commitment, and so we went to Atlantic, and Atlantic had to have the records out. Now check this out. This was done on a Friday. Friday, we met with the head of Atlantic, and we said that you had to have the record out by Monday. In America, records typically go out on Tuesday. We said you have to have it out by Monday so the other guys can't beat you. So Atlantic Records had the records pressed over the weekend, had a helicopter fly the records back to New York, and then have a fleet of limos deliver them to all the hot clubs up and down the Eastern Seaboard so they can say that, well, we didn't just bring it to the disco convention, we had actually serviced the record already. So all the top DJs had the record. They showed up at the convention, and they had that record in their hand with our name on it, right, and the label of Atlantic. And then we also, in those days, Studio 54 was the top club in the world. So we got one of the DJs from Studio 54 to put his name on the record and say that he mixed it. He didn't mix any. He didn't know how to. He didn't know how to mix. He had never been in a recording studio in his life. But it was cool. It was fun. It was marketing. It was guerrilla. We figured out what we had to do to get noticed, and every DJ wanted to be the DJ at Studio 54, and they couldn't believe that he was mixing records too. Like, damn, Studio 54 is it. They saw his name. They saw this group called Chic or something, and they started pumping it, and it came in with that bass line. And as soon as they heard that bass line, they were hooked with that boom, boom, boom. Now, it doesn't sound heavy like records. Whoops! It doesn't sound heavy like records now with 808s and with tone generators and bass that's like subsonic because no one had subwoofers in those days. So in those days, we typically rolled off everything that was under 60 cycles. Now I love it. Now you add that shit. Yeah. But this sounded heavy back in those days because it's relatively mono because all clubs were left, right, left, right, left, right. And we knew that. So we knew that the clubs were going to be our places. That broke us, and when you fold this record down to mono, it sounds almost the same because it's not very stereo. And that was our edge. So you played that record, and our record sounded heavy to people. And everybody, all the DJs kept going, I want that record with all that bass because it was a new phenomenon to them. And it was the hit of the convention, and within a matter of weeks, it hit radio. One radio station called WDAS broke our record. One guy. And what happened was New York had this powerful dude named Frankie Crocker who never wanted to be behind anybody. And this one station broke us. And the following week, we got on the secondary R&B dance station in New York, which was brand spanking new. It was called 99X. And so now this woman was the second person to go on us. So now you have this woman in New York City playing this new group called Chic, and Frankie Crocker's not on it. He had to go on it. We forced him on it. And from that moment on, we realized that we could be in control of our destinies by making certain moves with the public or programmers or DJs, and you create a buzz. And at that point, the corporate powers had to listen to you. So the difference between the world of those days is probably not that different now, because now you have tools available that you can create a buzz. I mean, we really only created a buzz with a few hundred people, and then that few hundred turned to a few thousand, then tens of thousands, then literally millions. I mean, Dance Dance Dance, our first single was, believe it or not, it was a platinum single. Now, most people don't realize this because we went gold on both labels. So we sold 1 million copies on Atlantic and 1 million copies on Buddha. We didn't get paid for Buddha because they didn't pay anyway. But our agreement was we allowed them to not pay us so they wouldn't sue us, because we literally were signed to them first.
There's so much of what you're talking about seems like a precursor to the dance music, and is a precursor to the dance music that everyone in this room is familiar with, you know, whether it be the DJ, the importance of the DJ, the disc jockey, the labels, the 12-inch edit. But one thing that, you know, is synonymous with Chic and your productions and, you know, has had a huge effect all the way down the line is the breakdown. Yeah. Talk to me about the breakdown and why that was so infectious in club culture.
Well, we sort of knew it because even in just live R&B, the breakdown's important. If you see us play, you know, we do our thing, we're loud, and then boom, when the singers come in, bang, we try and break it down. And every now and then in certain settings, we have to break it down even further just because of the dynamics of the house. So that's an integral part to R&B and groove music, to us at least. That's the culture I grew up in. Matter of fact, that first show at the Apollo where Betty Wright had the chart 13 pages long, it's not because she was singing for 13 pages, because the band was broken down and she was talking. You know, ladies and gentlemen, there's a lot of clean-up women out there in the audience, but I know some clean-up men out there, blah, blah, blah. And she went on and on and on and on. But it was that breakdown, and then the band would come in with different levels of groove, and that's the Chic formula. What we do is we break it down to almost nothing, and then we rebuild the track in the listener's ears. You hear one instrument come in at a time. You hear it on Dance Dance Dance, our first single, but you really hear us take it to a higher art form in the song Good Times. In Good Times, like in Dance Dance Dance, obviously the two stars are me and Bernard, because it's our band. We didn't know anyone else except for Luther and those guys in those days. So obviously me, Bernard, Rob, who the keyboard player, we're the guys. So we're the three people who solo. Later on, when we become more of a unit, we start to feature more of the people. And in Good Times, that's when we really have solid footing. And we get the breakdown. We develop to a real art form. And we believe that listeners will be able to take that long development of the groove. And here, I'm the leader of the band. It takes me forever before I get to come back in and play my part, because we start realizing that all of those layers are beautiful to people. And that's when hip-hop was sort of at its infancy, and we realized that we had the perfect record for MCs, because the breakdown took so long to develop that they could have rhymes that would go on forever, and by coming in with different parts of the groove, it would add dynamics to their raps. So they could just go on, and next thing you know, the band behind them would start to grow, and they'd have like different things. They'd have different flows for different parts of the breakdown. And the Chic motto was, a song is an excuse to go to a chorus. That's all we cared about. That's why our songs start with choruses. That's the hook. That's what gets you. So a song to us is just an excuse to go to the chorus, and the chorus is just an excuse to go to the breakdown. That's all we want to do. We just want to get to the part where we're playing. Can you play Good Times? But anyway, so what was interesting is that so that was the single version, and even that, to go out instrumentally like that was revolutionary in those days in the world of pop and in the world of R&B. You didn't just go out and let the band play, but but Chic is all about the band playing, and it's the interplay between the vocals and we're a unit. We perform as a unit, and it's about the space. And we were talking while the record was playing. When this record came out was the summer of '79, and a really powerful incident called Disco Sucks hit America, and it scorched our careers. We never had a hit record. Chic never had a hit record after that. That was it, because the industry just sort of shut us down. However, a year after this record went into #1, like the two records that were running up the charts at the same time was My Sharona by the Knack, and they were a brand new band. That was their first single, and Good Times. And My Sharona, the entire music industry in America carried My Sharona on their backs to #1. Don't get me wrong, My Sharona was a great song. It was a really good ditty. But it was a quirky individual kind of thing. It was almost like Devo. When Devo hit with their version of it actually wasn't as clever, sorry. I mean, to me, Devo is genius. But when Devo redid Satisfaction, it was, you can't do that. Only Devo could do that. And when the record My Sharona came out, it was this quirky ditty that was it was almost like a novelty record, and you've never heard another record go down. But a year after the industry said that we sucked and all that stuff, 1 year to the date, the #1 record on the Billboard charts was Queen's Another One Bites the Dust. And it sounded remarkably like Good Times. John Deacon was right there with us. Oh, yeah. He was our boy. Everybody, they don't realize that musicians have never had a problem with other music. It's unfortunate. It's the fans who go, oh, no, I'm only into punk rock. Oh, no, I'm only into this. It's like, wait a minute. No. The other day, we played with Johnny Marr up in Manchester. Johnny Marr named his son Nile. He was so into my style of playing. And, no one would think of the Smiths in the same category as Chic. And people who were into the Smiths were definitely not into Chic, usually. But the truth is that musicians, we all get along. Like last night, I couldn't sleep as usual. And after looking at the photos that everybody had posted of us playing with Johnny Marr, I kept thinking to myself, I said, damn, I wonder what would the world look like if in order to run for public office or be a world leader, that it was mandatory that you had to be able to play to play an instrument, at least sing or play an instrument. Check this out. Think about this. And then in order to have any kind of relevant policy meeting, you had to jam first. Like you all, seriously, I'm dead serious. You all had to get into a room, right? You all had to get into a room with your axe and then make music. What do you think would happen after that session? I mean, everybody was being cynical and going, yeah, well, someone's going to be fighting over the lead vocal and so-and-so will want a solo. You know what? Let me tell you something. I have been with musicians that we're playing with for the first time in our lives many times, and we become like Chic. It becomes a unit. Every record I've ever produced, I join the band. It's like we're in it together. It's like, it's not, Duran Duran produced by Nile Rodgers. It's Nile Rodgers who's actually in Duran Duran for a few months, and we're in it together. It's just my job to make sure that a record is delivered. But if you've ever seen me in the studio with people, we're down together. We're in it together. And I know that when musicians have a mission to accomplish, you become like a sports team. You become like soldiers. You become like, it's that spirit of camaraderie. It's that same thing that I felt the day that those dudes said, oh, wow, look at that, Spade dudes with roller skates. We became like a family. We became comrades. So me and the Freaks and the Hippies, we all became one family. Once we dropped acid, we were the same. We were like, hey, man, so what records are you into? Well, I'm into, Anytime the Hunter gets captured by the game. What are you into? Oh, man, I'm into, Gloria. And next thing you know, we were down together. And I know that if people were forced to play together, as I was in all of my different school orchestras, and you had to, people used to have to carry you because the orchestra had to sound good. You don't want somebody to sound bad. So that's my observation and my soapbox routine for today.
Well, that's cool. I think that gets a round of applause. So Queen were not the only band to be directly influenced by Good Times, were there? There was a whole swathe of records that sort of seemed to tip their hat to the Good Times groove.
Yeah, it was funny because the industry said that disco, meaning Chic, because at that time we were really the band that was selling the most records. Atlantic Records, in the entire illustrious career of that label, and I know you all know who Atlantic Records is, it's a major, major tour de force when it comes to bands and originality and changing the way the world listens to music, has never had a triple platinum other than Le Freak. That's it. That's the only one in their history. So everybody used to make fun of us. They used to say, you guys are paying the rent at Atlantic while Ahmed is signing all these other bands that aren't doing anything. Just he can go out to dinner with the Rolling Stones. But meanwhile, we're the ones that are selling all the records. The Stones, I think at that time, when they released Miss You, it sold 3 million units, right? And that was like, man, our single sold 6 million units.
Wow.
So it was the thing that was great about the disco era is that it allowed all of these baby bands to compete with people who are at the top of the food chain, because it was just all about what you felt like. There was no politics involved. And when the Knack dropped My Sharona, they all of a sudden made it political. And once it became political and people had to choose sides, it was like, well, we're going to choose sides with the guys who look more like us instead of those freaky dudes singing about freaks and disco. And it was weird because the guys in the Knack actually became good friends of ours. I even knew Sharona really well. We've had fun. So a year later, a whole slew of records that paid homage to Good Times came out, one after the next. I mean, it was, yeah, and also the beginning of hip hop. I mean, Rapper's Delight was huge.
And Blondie definitely
Blondie,
borrowed
Rapture,
from you, right?
Yeah. And play.
We all know that record.
Yeah, no kidding.
I mean, apart from being one of the first examples of hip hop recorded onto vinyl, and also obviously without question the most famous record that Sugar Hill ever released, it was probably the first high profile example of sampling and the lawsuit that followed. Tell us about that.
What was interesting is that they put the sample right up front there like that. It's like right out in the open. So I was at this club, and remember, we're part of the culture, right? So at this point, we're hanging at clubs. We know all the DJs. And we knew that typically when you heard a song that was really, really long, that was when the DJ went to the bathroom. So he had either a reel-to-reel tape recorder playing the song, right? Or he had some apprentice or somebody else in there, playing the song, so he can go to the bathroom or talk to some girls or get a drink or something like that. So when I heard this song, obviously I knew that that's not us playing. That's not Bernard playing the bass. That's not me playing guitar. And it's close, but and I was cool with that because we all did this. We used to. There's still a famous record of a famous remix of "Love Is the Message." It's not a remix. It's actually 2-track edits. Me and my partner did that, and it's had like 30 different lives because that sample, that loop of do 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 do. We created that loop in the studio. We had a tape going outdoors, and it was like just on like a bunch of mic stands, going around and around and around. And that 2-track keeps getting added to over and over and over again. And that's our loop. And it was funny. When we created that loop, we had it running outdoors and it started raining. And it was going like, do, 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 do. Then all of a sudden it started to do some wow. And it was, what the fuck? And it had rained outside because the tape loop was going all through the studio and went outdoors into the backyard and then back into the studio because you had to keep the tension on the tape so that the tape recorder would keep it at the same speed. And then all of a sudden it's I'm like, what happened? And it was all wet. But anyway, sorry about that. So we were accustomed to people re-recording exact grooves or something that sounded like that, and then you would do an insert into the 2-track, and then you sell it to other DJs because everybody wanted breakdowns. So we were cool, but when I heard that sample right at the front of the record, I knew that was our song because I'm the producer. I know what my records sound like. I know what my strings sound like, and I know what the power station, or the studio that we record it sounds like, and I know what those echo chambers and we used to call it the women's bathroom. You know what it sounds like, and it's so distinctive. And I went, and I heard, ew. And I went, what the? And I thought that he had our record and was doing it, but then I looked over and he was standing at the bar. I was like, how do you do that? What like magical trick do you have? And then he admitted that he bought it in Harlem that afternoon, and he showed me the album, and it said Sugar Hill Records, blah, 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 and had all these names on it, and one of them wasn't mine or Bernard's. And I was like, whoa, what's up with that? And, we tracked them down, and it's so funny how everything in my life is so damn ironic. When you get to the end of the Sugar Hill chain, you wind up at one guy, a guy named Morris Levy. When you get to the end of the Buddha Records chain, where we signed first, you wind up at one guy. Like, so now we have to sue probably the most terrifying, powerful person in the record business. And we had to do it all by ourselves because our own record label would not go up against them. Morris Levy was so bad. How bad was he? He was so powerful that he sued John Lennon and won, right? So nobody wanted to go up against Morris Levy because he'd even win in the courts. Probably people figured he had the judge paid off. But anyway, we sued by ourselves. And at the end of the day, I really, truly believe this. I talk about this in my book where guys come in with guns and the whole bit and threaten us and all sorts of stuff. But we still stand our ground. And in the end, we sued. And if you look at Rapper's Delight now, our names are on it. It's 50-50 split. And we established that precedent in hip hop and in sampling because they sample in rock records too. Don't get it twisted. I mean, there's samples all over the place. But what happened was we had said to, we were like going, man, you can't do that to a film. I mean, at the time we got signed, Star Wars was the big movie. Like imagine I'm doing a music video and if I just snatch a piece of Star Wars and stick it in my music video, you can't do that. You can't snatch a piece of my record and stick it on your record because you don't want to pay for the string players that we had to pay for. You don't want to pay for Bob Clearmountain, which we had to pay for. You don't want to pay for Bernard Edwards. That's it. So, those copyright laws were already in effect, but somebody needed to challenge it, and we challenged it, and eventually they acquiesced, and we settled, and it was pretty incredible because I don't know if you guys, well, of course not. I've only seen it once, but $500,000 in cash is unbelievable to look at, especially when it's like all street money. When it's all street money and it's like all different sizes, it's not all neatly packed. Like, pop, all right. Anyway, so after we finished our lawsuit that wound up not going to court, and we settled, Morris Levy was actually, even though he's really tough and even though everybody was afraid of him, testing, sort of cooler heads prevailed because Rapper's Delight was only available as a 12-inch for a very long time. I don't even know the 7-inch version of it. But so that means that the suggested retail price was 3 times that of a normal single. So it went multiple platinum. Can you imagine what the royalties from that one record was? It was unheard of. So I guess at that time it was like, yeah, it was a lot of money, but is it worth it? And also the unsung hero in this story. Man, this is I don't think I'm hitting the mute button, or am I? Testing. No, I'm not hitting the mute button. No. The unsung hero in this story is our attorney at the time used to work for Morris Levy in the early days, so he knew where probably literally all the bodies were buried, and so he represented us, and he said, "Look, Morris, these are great guys. They're super fair. You need to be fair with them." So after we settled and established this new precedent in the record industry, which actually already existed. Everything wound up fine, and from that moment on, my life changed because I've had a number of records go number one, songs that I made years and years and years ago that I never thought would have a secondary life. A song that we recorded that we loved, but it was after the Disco Sucks thing happened and I said that Chic never had another hit single again. Meaning the band Chic, the Chic organization did great, but the band never had a hit. We did a song called Soup for One, which was sampled by Mojo, and they made a hit record out of it called Lady, and it was amazing to me that a person could make a hit out of out of Soup for One. We thought it was a great record at the time, but you know how when your records don't make it, you think that it's just your fault and it's not happening. And then Mojo did Lady, and it was like the bomb. We couldn't believe it. And of course, Will Smith getting jiggy with it. And of course, the joke in America for a while was, you know, when Puff, who's my boy, so I can say this, they used to say that when Puff wanted a #1 record, he would just sample a Nile Rodgers song.
It's true. It's true.
He would just
list
sample
them,
a Nile
list them for a
Rodgers
second.
song.
Can you list them for a second?
Right. Well,
Did he on
Faith Evans,
Yeah.
Love Like This. Well,
Notorious, Duran Duran.
Notorious, right? Notorious B.I.G. Right, Notorious. That was Duran Duran, even right. And then Mace, Been Around the World. Oh, and the famous one. Oh my God, Diana Ross.
Yeah.
I'm coming out. More Money, More Problems. So, and all of those records, when you come to my house, you can see that I have the BMI list of plays. Like when you get when a song hits 1 million plays on the radio, you get a special certificate. So I have 1 million plays for the original one, and then 1 million plays for like Getting Jiggy with It, and then 1 million plays, you know, for like the other songs.
Oh, excuse me. Should we listen to Super One?
Sure. Oh, you can listen to Super One. Well, let's listen to Mojo. So, you know, it actually makes me really proud when new musicians and artists find tracks like that, which I love. I mean, I understand it may not be commercial on the same level as say something like, you know, The Freak or I Want Your Love, but it has a certain je ne sais quoi that's still cool. You know, it's chic, it's arty, it's got the cool chord changes. You know, augmented 11. Wow, that's cool. You know. But, you know, whatever.
And the fact that you are so sampled, obviously, you know, indicates just that you are the master of that groove. I was always interested to know, when you're songwriting, does the groove come first or does the song come first?
It changes depending upon the mood, depending upon the time of day, depending upon the job. If I'm hired to write a song or an album or something like that, it's all over the map. I did a film called Coming to America. It was my part over there, Rich. It was the first time he started working. There's Rich, give it up. Yeah, Rich. It was the first time we worked together. He came. Did you audition? How did I hire you? Yeah. Okay. And then brought your ass to L.A.
And then we were in LA, 5 weeks, 17 hours a day.
So, you know, so now I'm hired to do this film called Coming to America. And what happened was, this is the way the story goes. This was the way it was told to me. John Landis, who was the director of the film, said that Eddie Murphy had seen this film called The Man Who Saw Tomorrow or something like that, about the quatrains of Nostradamus, and he had predicted the exact day of the big earthquake where California was going to fall into the ocean. So we had to have principal photography wrapped by a certain day. So we moved to California, and we basically move in on the Paramount lot. And Rich and I were there all, like he said, 17 hours a day, and some days would be even longer than that. And the way that I was composing for that film is that they would give us dailies, because they didn't know what part was going to be scored, right? Normally they finish a movie, they edit it all together, and then you stand with the director and you do what they call spotting. And he goes, okay, right here, the villains are doing here, or right here, they're in love, or whatever, or they're riding down the street. So with that, they would give me dailies, and I'd have to watch the film and sort of understand emotionally what was going on and write to that right on the spot. And then I would take those thumbnails home and work on it. And I'd get together with Rich the next day because I had a synclavier. And then we'd do like mock orchestrations of it. And then we'd have to present it for the director. So in that case, I was being an artistic technocrat. Like I had a job to do and I had to fulfill that gig right there on the spot. I couldn't say, oh man, I'm not feeling it today, man. Let me drop a little acid. It was like, no. I couldn't, I was hired to do something and I had to do it. And it had to, in my opinion, it had to be great. And at the end of the day, coming to America turned out amazing. And, you know, I don't think that it would have wound up being that great had it not been voluntary indentured slavery, voluntary indentured slavery or whatever. But it was tough. It was a tough job, but we did it, and it came out wonderful, as opposed to sometimes Chic records, which are at my leisure. It's, you know, like I get a collection of songs and I go, oh, I think we're supposed to do an album now, or I feel like doing an album. So I'm not being evasive. I just don't, it just changes. And I love being put under pressure. You know, it's funny, man, now that I think of it, almost every Chic record is done under pressure because we put ourselves under the pressure, because I think we work better that way. So grooves come first. Sometimes we'll play a groove. In the case of Le Freak, we had been denied access to Studio 54, even though Grace Jones had told us that we were her personal guest. And we wrote a song called I'll Do It the way we really wrote it. We wrote a song called Aw, Fuck Off. And it was great to us. Maybe if we broadcast this, I'll say we wrote a song called Aw, F Off. And it was totally based on a groove. We just sat around, we were doing... And I started playing that, and Bernard jumped in. And what was great is that when I did this, Bernard actually was just sitting there and let me groove. And he was just laughing and joking, and he was making up words. And I was going... And he went, aw, F off, F Studio 54, F off, aw, F off, F Studio 54, F off. And then we got into it, and we started writing a bridge, and we were going... And he kept saying, if a cab driver cuts you off, F Studio 54. If a don't do, F Studio 54. Anyway, so he got all into it and said, wow, you know, that's really happening, man. And we used to just groove all the time for fun. This made us, we had a blast just jamming, and we turned that groove into a song. So we reverse engineered it from something that felt good and groovy, then we wrote a song. Sort of like Everybody Dance. Everybody Dance was written as a groove and hip chord changes, and then we wrote a song afterwards. Yeah. How you know what's really funny is that when I actually listen to it, when I'm playing it on stage, I don't think about this, but now when I listen to it, we were very conscious of the fact that we were making a record. Like, when you hear the transitions, when we go from a verse to a chorus, it's those simple nuances that let you know, as a band, as a unit, we're switching to the chorus. So the part becomes modified. There are transition fills that we play to go to the next section. It's not like a loop record where the thing comes and it just dramatically shifts. And the thing that I've always noticed about some of the really great producers who make records from other people's live performances is that they're so conscious of that, and they actually get the only part of the record that is that's the most viable to loop. Like, I've seen, like when you watch Timbaland work and stuff like that, they already know that you go to this part of the record, it's like 4.5 minutes out, and that's the part that's loopable, because we're playing it differently all the time. And especially, you know, when I'm playing those 16-note accents and stuff like that, and I don't play it going to the verse. You know, it's like if you loop that part of it, it's going to be really different than if you loop another part of the record. And as I said earlier, we sang and performed every bit of this thing. So from the first note to the end, everything is performed, the claps and all that stuff. There's nothing that has the benefit of a loop. The very first time that I superimposed something that we made as a uniform group and then put it into a record was I was doing a record with Hall & Oates called Adult Education. And I had my synclavier, and I told Daryl and John that all we had to do was get it right once. And they went, what do you mean? I said, yeah, we just got to get it really right once, get the exact way that we want it to be. And they said, then what happened? I says, well, then I'm going to sample it on my synclavier and fly it in. And they went, what? You kidding me? And then we don't have to sing this all day long. I said, no. And I went up on 8th Street and grabbed a bunch of girls who were just walking around the street. And I said, I want you to go, oh, yeah, oh, yeah. And they were like going, well, we're not really singers. I said, exactly, because you're supposed to sound like students in a classroom. You're supposed to sound like the way we sounded when we were kids. And I think that's changed our records to a huge extent. The randomness of this type of thing is its own wonderful R&B old school thing. That's not saying that other stuff isn't valid. It's just a different art form. But the thing is that I think that there's something a little different when you listen to random events, and especially when people are performing random events. When I did the album with Madonna, Like a Virgin, I said to her, you know, she came in and all of the demos were all sequenced. And I said to her, like, well, what if we played most of this stuff? I said, but how can you play that? I said, no, we actually can do that. And the first thing I did to show her is we did this song called Dress You Up. And the demo of Dress You Up is sequenced. The bass is and I had my guys come in. I said, watch this shit. And my man Rob is just going, gonna dress you up in my love. And then when we were doing so anyway, most of that record is played. There's a couple of things that do use drum machine because it's an integral part of the sound of the demo and the sound of the song. But almost everything on that record is basically just Chic playing the record. And the reason why it doesn't sound like a Chic record, so to speak, is because we cede to that artist. We're not trying to make a Chic record. We're making a Madonna record. But when you listen to it, and the reason why I tried to insist upon it is because I wanted her as an artist to be seen on a higher level. And unfortunately, when she gave me those demos, and you got to remember, you got to go back in time and understand that it was different. Like the singer, like today on a record, the singer is just sort of beating you up. It's like, there's like no part where like Shakira ain't singing. This is like singing. But that was not what we did in those days. A dance record was like 8-9 minutes long. How are you going to sing for 8 or 9 minutes? It's not interesting. Whereas now I'll go to a club and I'm amazed at how short a dance record is. I'm like, damn, 3 minutes? Like, where's the rest of the record? And the breakdown and everything happens in 3.5, 4 minutes and it's done. And then they'll play like a massive amount of songs in a night. But in the old days, you could hear, I don't know, 60, 70 songs an entire night. I mean, the entire evening, because songs would have long breakdowns and the DJ would just like groove forever. So I wanted Madonna to be thought of as more of an artist where there was an interplay with the band. And I know that artists sing differently when the track is moving around. You interpret differently. You can't help it. If you're a real artist. I mean, and I wanted her to become that real thing, because by the time we made that record, she had proven to me that she had the work ethic, she was that magical thing. And I've never made a record as successful as Like a Virgin, neither has she. And so there's something to be said for that combination of old school and new school. There is some level where the marriage does something very, very unique. And I think that that's why so many sampled records are phenomenal, because they capture the essence of that thing and they catch it in a moment of time and they keep whipping it back on you. It's like you can't resist that thing. So that's just an opinion, but that's what it feels like to me.
So we just listened to The Freak, and that sort of sums up Chic at their hottest, right? When it was really jumping off in the sort of quote unquote disco era. And I just wanted to ask you what your relationship is like with the word disco, because you talked about disco Sarts and being associated with it, and what did that do for you, and how did it hinder you as well, being directly associated with that time and that movement?
At the time, I was really hurt, not because I was anti-disco at all. You got to be kidding. I love disco. I mean, I was the first one to go to discos, hanging out, dancing all the time. But I thought it was disingenuous because Chic was not a disco band. We had a couple of disco hits, but if you buy a Chic album, we're just a regular R&B band. We're doing the same thing that Kool and the Gang did. We had instrumentals, ballads. If you compare to any Chic record, if you compare the first Chic record to the first Village People record, or Cerrone, or Silver Convention, or all of those really hot disco acts that were happening at the time, our records were not anything like their records. We always had an instrumental. The band played. Nothing was sequenced. I didn't even know what a sequencer was. I swear to you, when I first heard Donna Summer and I heard Giorgio Moroder doing that stuff, I thought the guy was God. I mean, I still think he's God, but I thought he was God from a groove point of view. I couldn't believe anybody could play like that. I was like, damn, I can't wait to meet this dude and make records. And that's how I developed I Want Your Love. If you listen to the song I Want Your Love, that's me imitating a sequencer. I didn't know you could buy something that would go. I didn't know you could buy that. I was like, damn, I needed to learn that. I wanted to learn that so bad. I actually dreamt that song, believe it or not. It was on my mind so much. I wanted to be that guy. I wanted to be that precise, quantified. I just thought that was the funkiest thing you could ever imagine. And when I wrote I Want Your Love, I literally was trying to do that. It was only, and it wasn't like a month later, or it was a long time before I found out that there was something called a sequencer. I thought a sequence was just the name of a synthesizer. It was just a cool name. I didn't know that it had a clock function that actually could I mean, we used to achieve that same effect by using a device called the Keypex that would basically open and close the signal, the audible signal, and I would play. And we did this on our very first record, on Everybody Dance. The keyboard player that I used, it was one of my jazz friends, and I just loved the dude, and I wanted him on my record, but he couldn't play funky. So what he did was he just played, the best he could, and Bob Clearmountain had me key his rhythm from my guitar playing. So I'm actually playing and he's just doing whatever the hell he's doing. But when you hear it on the record, you hear all sorts of mistakes because he can't play the chord changes. And I'm thinking like, wow, this guy used to be my hero. And now he's playing on my record and he can't hang with Chic. It was incredible. But when you hear that 12-inch and you hear that funky clavinet, that's actually me playing the rhythm, and he's just holding the chord changes. So we did that on a number of records. If you listen to Diana Ross's Upside Down, the strings are going, that's how much I wanted to be Giorgio. We didn't know how to do it. So we had the strings play half notes, and we had Tony's hi-hat going, and we just bring the gates in. And, I'm not sure everybody knows this, but when we turned that album in, Motown hated the record. They weren't going to release it. And then at some point in time, they tried to remix it, and they opened up the strings, and they called us up, and they were furious. Why did you erase those strings? And we went, what are you talking about? The strings that you gave us on the demo, which wasn't a demo, we actually mixed the record. The strings that you gave us on the mix are now all of a sudden gone. Are you that pissed off? Blah, blah, blah. Well, it's our property. And we went, what kind of engineers do you have? You can't figure it out. We did this on our first record. We said, no, all you have to do is this, that, and then you'll have the strings. So they did that. They copied it, and next thing you know, even on their sort of what I call their lame mix, although it was still a huge record, the biggest record of her career, did that technique. So, I was always influenced by some of the disco innovations, but we just didn't know how to do it. So we pulled it off our way. And maybe it's a good thing that we didn't have a sequencer. Maybe because it forced me to do that thing, and I would have probably never done I Want Your Love like that.
And before we step into the 80s and Chic is in the production realm, just indulge us and let us know what New York was like at that time, because I know that you were a regular at some of the most famous club nights of all time, and you paint a vivid picture of what it was like to hang out at Studio 54 and all of those classic spots.
Yeah, it was just probably the most fun I've ever had. I can't imagine if you took that chunk out of life, you guys wouldn't be, and girls, you wouldn't be who you are. That era was so powerful. It was so bohemian, and so revolutionary and so open. It gave us probably a false sense of power. It probably gave us a false sense of what we could do because, in fact, the big companies were really still in control, but we felt like we had more power. We were able to really push against the boundaries. I don't know if they still have record pools because I don't know if they still service old DJs with vinyl. But in my day, every record came out on vinyl, everything. And I think that the big record companies use the record pools to sort of co-opt the power that artists had. Because when we could go to a DJ with our own pressing and give it to him, we had an edge. But once the record company says, well, we'll give you all the records free, and then you just had to report and stuff like that, it was like, uh-oh. They started to take away our power because now they had a tool. The DJs didn't have to buy all those records. They could get them free. And I'm pretty sure that they would say, well, report on our records. Like, I can't swear to it, but why not? I mean, if you have that kind of power, if you have that kind of financial power over people. So basically, what went from this great bohemian, people-propelled, ground-up movement, because we really were in control, it shifted, and then when the whole disco sucks thing happened, and they had to circle the wagons and protect the industry and protect the money, because the money was massive. I mean, if you think it's big now, yeah, it's big if you're Gaga or Jay-Z or Rihanna. Yeah, it's ridiculous. But in the old days, it was so big that you didn't have to be anywhere near that, and you were still generating millions and millions of dollars. You know, how many artists were signed to Atlantic Records when we went triple platinum? Dozens and dozens and dozens, and they would get second and third albums because they were making money. They were part of this overall big, gigantic food chain that they only got dropped when they stopped making money for the label. So you could put out a flop, relatively speaking, and be pretty successful. I mean, because the one thing that a lot of people don't understand is that the great thing about music, unlike any of the other electronic arts or some of the other arts, it doesn't have to be translated. We all understand music. Like, if you have a hit record like Le Freak, I can go play Le Freak in Russia, and we sing it just like that, and everybody starts singing the songs. A few years ago, we did a gig in Vegas, and it was all Pacific Rim, what they call mini dragons. It was all Asian millionaires and billionaires that had come, and the hotel had paid for them to come there, and nobody could speak English. Man, we go into a song, and next thing you know, it was perfect English in the room. Have you heard about the new dance craze? And as soon as it was over, it was like, ni hao ma. It was like Mandarin and Cantonese, and as soon as our record would come in, they go like, my forbidden lover, my love is forbidden. We keep all of it done. And then like the record's over, boom, back to Chinese. It was like, it was unbelievable. And it just shows you, so think about that. How profitable is that? Like if you do a film, you got to put in subtitles, blah, blah, blah. You do a book. I just have a new book out now. No one can read it in Spain unless you speak English. So it's got to be translated. A record, super profitable. I remember we put out the album with Good Times, and the record companies were so greedy that they overpressed the records, per stamp. There's only a certain amount of records that you can get out of one vinyl stamp to press vinyl. They were so greedy, they just like pushed the limits. They said, let's do double the amount. Well, when Bernarda and I went into quality control we saw that half the records didn't play. They just shipped them to Indonesia. I couldn't believe it. I was so embarrassed. But it's because in Indonesia, it was just fine that they put on the record and went, Good Times, and they'd be singing, So it's a highly profitable business because once you make it and you hit that number, just ship it out the door. No other ancillary. You don't have to do any more work. So, obviously, the powers that be really wanted to protect that business, and ouch, that's two. I understand. I really do get why that type of greed, it probably is very seductive. So, people who are either in the business or want to get in the business, I think that the first thing you have to do is you better make sure you love this. You know what I mean? Because chances are you will never make it to the level of Jay-Z and Rihanna. I never believed that I was going to make it to the level that I made it to, but I always believed I'd be a working musician and I'd be able to pay my bills and to, you know, live the type of life I wanted to live, and that I'd be able to play music for a living. And if you want to do that, that's absolutely achievable. You can make music for a living. You can absolutely do it. Be you a DJ, singer, musician, or whatever. And it's great to set your sights on the brass ring, you know, but make sure you love what you're doing, that even if you don't get paid, you still show up for work.
So we've spoken about your experiences as an artist, in the band, as a songwriter. I think it's really important that we dedicate a portion of this talk to the art of producing, because, of course, that's dedicated, you know, sort of dominated so much.
Yeah, do we get a break so I can go to the bathroom?
Yeah, absolutely. You can take a bathroom
the
break
bathroom
anytime.
is a necessary part of record production.
Here we go.
That's 3. I know I have to go to the bathroom.
5-minute bathroom break, yeah? All right, we're just listening to a song. I'm pretty sure there's no one on the planet that hasn't heard that record. And would it be fair to say that that was the first time that you were asked to produce an artist other than your own band?
Yes, that would be fair.
Yeah. And that was Sister Sledge, of course. Tell us how that came about and how you approached it.
When we finally got signed to Atlantic Records, the gentleman who signed us, who did the whole helicopter routine with the limos, for some reason, he really believed in us. We were brand new kids on the block, so to speak. And in the old days, back when dinosaurs roamed the earth, and the troglodytes, back in the old days, the record companies really, really were dependent upon artists. And they wanted to know what artists thought and what they felt and blah, blah, blah. And they believed that certain artists had that unique thing that they could feel the pulse of the record buying public. Because if you didn't sell records, what difference did it make if you were a recording artist? So right from our first record, the head of the company believed that we had something that connected to the radio, to the record buying public, even though it wasn't quite apparent to the rest of the people at the record label. So he asked us if we wanted to record the Rolling Stones. Like, we were brand new. It's like, you want us to record the Rolling Stones? He says, yeah, it'd be great. Because basically what he thought we had was we had the key to Studio 54. Because we had, on our first record, we had the DJ. You know, you'd go to Studio 54, you hear both of our singles playing. And he just thought maybe we can give that magic to other artists. So when we backed off the Rolling Stones, then he offered us Bette Midler. He actually offered us the entire roster. And we were nervous about it because we thought that it was our sound and our songs that were the hits. It didn't necessarily have to be artist-oriented, but if it were artist-oriented, we'd have to craft it for those artists. So how could you go to Mick Jagger and tell him, don't worry, Mick, we got this. And we were smart enough. We had worked for stars all of our lives to know that stars look at the world a different way. But we looked at ourselves as like, we're just working musicians. We just do our job. So we said to the head of the record company that, and we didn't say this in an egotistical way, actually. We were just trying to give him an example of what we did and how in our lives, music was the star, not the people. That was the Chic concept. Music's the star. And he says, well, what do you mean by that exactly? I said, well, I could turn your secretary into a star. He says, really? I said, absolutely. He said, well, how would you do that? I said, I would write a song about what it's like to be the secretary at a big recording company who's got all these big stars and she's sitting there undiscovered. And he went, wow, that's genius. And I said, think about it. Wouldn't that be a great song? Imagine, you're sitting there all day long watching all these people come in and out, and meanwhile you're better than they are and you can't get your shot. And I said, I'd go write that song for her. So anyway, so he says, well, we have this group that they're all sisters and they're signed to the label and blah, 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 blah. And he starts telling us about this group called Sister Sledge. Now, I had heard of Sister Sledge because they had a record called Love Don't Go Through No Changes on Me, which is a great record. But it didn't propel them to the top of the pop charts. It was an R&B record, and it did okay. So he suggested Sister Sledge to us. And he told us all about them, and we were writing it down on legal pads and tried to act like we were pros. Anyway, when we got home, we looked at our notes, and the notes were literally the words. There was the foundation to the words for the song We Are Family. And that was the first song that we wrote for Sister Sledge, because somehow he had tuned into that thing that we talked about, the thing about the secretary sitting there. So we talked about this group of girls that were blah, 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 and, you know, flock like birds, you know, that thing. Anyway, we actually conceived the whole Sister Sledge concept, all the songs, everything, and we never met them. We never spoke to them. We never met them. The day that we met Sister Sledge was the day that Kathy sang that song you just heard. They walked into the studio. We were still writing it, but we knew what it was all about. There's this thing that we have between us called DHM, which basically stands for deep hidden meaning to us, but what it really means is to understand a song's DNA, its essential truth. And once we understood the essential truth of Sister Sledge as we had conceived them, then we knew everything that we had to do to make a hit record.
So what's the fundamental difference between songwriting for an artist and producing an artist?
Yeah, you have to look at it from my point of view, because I can only speak for me. I don't know what other producers do, and I don't know what they think. All I know is what I think. And my job as a producer is I live to serve the project. That's it. That's my job. Quincy Jones described it as a record producer is basically like the director of a film, except our roles are a little bit more expanded because we're responsible for everything. The budget, the record, you know, coming in, and the food, which is very important when it comes to rock and roll. You gotta, you know, I have to have my artist well fed, and I have to know all the great restaurants. When I did the album, actually no, before I did the album Notorious with Duran, I did a song called The Wild Boys, and I moved to England for a while, and this was back in the day, and they didn't have restaurants that delivered food in England. I was like, no. We're going to change that right now. So what I did is I walked around and checked out all of the restaurants near the recording studio, and I gave the managers or the owners of the studios £100 a piece, which doesn't sound like a lot of money, but back then in 1980, whatever, that was a lot of money for nothing. I just gave it to them, and I said, now, one day, it sounded like the mafia, one day, you're going to get a phone call, and they're going to say that there's this guy, Nile Rodgers, calling, and he's going to want you to deliver food. Whatever you do, deliver that food. So that's what I did. I walked around, and I said to the guys, you know, don't worry, bring it on their own plates. We'll wash them and send them back to you. But I want to be able to keep my artist happy. I want to be able to create that atmosphere so that they're in their element. They don't have to worry about anything but making a great record. So in my position, producers are really responsible for the food, the atmosphere, the vibe. You have to be a part psychologist. And in my case, I'm an arranger. So I do the arrangements, the orchestration, and I always want to play on your record. So I don't like the record that much if I'm not playing on it. That's not quite true, but almost completely true. So I'm the guitarist. And I help you conceive it. I help you come up with the vision for what it is, because sometimes artists don't realize that the record that you're putting out now is your next record. It ain't your last record. It's not your first record. It's your current record. It's the record that's going to happen, because the day we finish it is not the record that's coming out, at least the world I come up in. The day we finish it, it may not come out for months. So you better make sure that you're ahead of the curve. So my job is always, and this is how I think, no matter who the person is, I become a fan, I study them, and I make their next record. I'm always doing what I think is the next logical step. In order for you to get in that chair, you had to walk there and sit down. I'm trying to do the thing, like if you hire me, what I'm trying to do is the thing that you're going to do after you get up and leave that chair. So that's my job. I have to figure out what you're going to. So that's what I call a producer.
Well, I think we should introduce the sort of next crucial relationship in your production time by playing, well...
Diana Ross?
Well, yeah, I think we should play... Do you want to play the version that you made? Or
No,
do you want to
play the version that came out, because this is what's great about this, is that when we finished this record, Motown told us in no uncertain terms that this was not a Diana Ross record. And I said to them exactly what I'm saying to you now. Yeah, you're right. It's not an old Diana Ross record. It's Diana's next record. And the way that we formulated this record is we sat down and we interviewed her for days and days and days on end, because we wanted it to be about this star's life. We were trying to do a biographical record for Diana Ross, something that was a holistic version of what this superstar's life would be like. Because remember, this is our first star. We knew that we had to, I'm not trying to be derogatory here, we knew that we had to placate her ego on some level, but it was also our responsibility to know where she was headed. So, like, let's deal with subject matters that are relevant to her life. I mean, why do a record that's just like Motown sort of cookie cutter? Okay, come in here and sing this. Whoever sings it the best gets the record. It was like, no, you're Diana Ross. You're a superstar. You're beyond that now. Now we should be crafting things exactly for you. This is your record. So, but the problem is that we do it our way. So you may not agree with us, but we've done a lot of research, so we're on the outside looking in. And sometimes, as we all well know, other people can see us better than we can see ourselves, because they're looking at us. I can only see a reflection of me, but you actually see me. So that's what we tried to show Diana, that we really respect you, and this is where you should be going, even though you may not agree yet. You will agree when this record comes out.
And Motown certainly didn't agree at first, did they?
They did not agree at all. But the problem is that, you got to remember I said earlier how records are very, very profitable. And if you get one that connects, at some point in time, after all the fighting, also we threatened to sue them because we had an ironclad contract. By the time we did the Diana Ross record, we had already had, I can't count right now, in the book I counted because I could actually sit back and look, but we had so many platinum plus records, one triple platinum record under our belt. Not many people had ever had a triple platinum single in America, even to this day. So we had one triple platinum, a few double platinums. Diana Ross didn't have any double platinum singles. We had a few double platinum singles, many platinum singles, and a shitload of gold singles. So we had only been in business 2.5 years, and we had all that stuff behind us. So we said to Motown, if we take time out of our lives to do this with your valuable superstar, we could do this with anyone. So you got to put our record out. You can't, even though we didn't have creative control on paper, because they own it and they were paying us, but we were like, man, that's a couple of months out of our lives that we could have been doing other double platinum records and triple platinum records. So we had a pretty good case. So we went to court and lawsuits and all that bull. And at a certain point in time, they put the record out. It shot to #1, biggest record of her entire career, and we just sat there like, why is this always so hard? Why is it that no one understands what we're trying to do? Is it that difficult? Now when you hear these songs, they just sound like pop songs. But at the time, they were very revolutionary. And her record company had never heard anything like this. And we had never written anything like this. And we've never written anything like it since, because we've never worked with that. Well, I did work with her many years later. But at that point, they were trying to now chase something, whereas we weren't trying to chase anything. We were pushing. It does sound sort of radical to me. It's not like any other Diana Ross record, and we've never done any Chic records like that, really. But you got to remember, this is artist specific. That's Diana Ross. That's for what we considered, the queen of pop R&B, And if you listen to that intro, when we tried to explain it, no one got it. We said, no, she's the queen. It's a fanfare. What do you mean it's a fanfare? And my exact words were, all right, so you got the President of the United States. When the President of the United States walks in the room, they go, ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States. Da, 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 da. So that's the President of the United States. How about the Queen of R&B pop soul? Ladies and gentlemen, Diana Ross. Pop, pop. Yeah, here she comes, you know. I was like, is that hard? Nobody got it. Nobody. I was like, man. And if you listen to the intro of that, that's all that is. It's a fanfare. This was us writing the beginning of Diana Ross's show. And the double entendre, the DHM of this song, was that we were very aware of Diana Ross's iconic status with the gay community. And I'm Coming Out was a very powerful slogan and catchphrase at the time, you know, blah, blah, blah. You know, he's coming out of the closet, she's coming out of the closet, I'm coming out, I'm coming out. It was like, wow. We get to say, I'm coming out. We get to start her show. We get to play a fanfare for this pop R&B diva. All this in one song. How clever is that? Well, obviously not very to some people. But it wasn't that hard, and especially if you ask us the question and then we explain it to you, it's like, okay, I could get that you may not get it right away, but to me, it's weird because it's their job to get this stuff. This is, to me, this is that high-level thinking that makes you qualified to be a record executive. You got to be able to understand artists are developing and growing, and when you push the edge, if you tap into somebody's soul and you get it right, because you don't always get it right, but if you get it right, that's the stuff you should take the chance on. In other words, you shouldn't keep trying to copy David Guetta records. You shouldn't keep trying. Yeah, it's like, come on already. Let David Guetta do David Guetta records. It's cool. Let him do that. He got it down. But it's like everybody's afraid to take a chance because this highly profitable industry, when you get that record that's making all that money, you don't have to translate it. You know, just put it out. So I just wasn't raised like that. I mean, you see where my parents were coming from. It was always push the envelope, speak with your own voice, because if somebody hears you, now you've created your own market. And since I've never been a star, I let the music speak for myself. Parliament Funkadelic used to have this great saying that I love. He used to go, let's just take it to the stage, sucker. It was like, we don't need to talk about all this bull. Let's just get on stage and I'll show you what we're talking about. So this was us taking it to the stage, and we thought it was clear as a bell. It's like, do we have to explain it anymore? Here it is. Ta-da. Oops, lawsuit, wind up in court.
And now that Diana Ross does use that as her opening song in every single show, and seeing as it was a #1 record, did you ever get that call where they were like, sorry, boys, you were right?
Well, how about this? This is even more funny. So I finished writing my book. It was about a year ago. So Diana and I are still like really, really good friends. So I say, hey, Diana, let's go out to the theater tonight. She said, okay, cool. So we go to see Elton John's Billy Elliot. And now we're in the car, and it's just she and I and the security dude. And the security guy ain't going to say anything, so it's boom, it's cool. Now it's basically me and Diana. So I'm writing the book, and I want to get her opinion on what was the deal. So I look at her, and I say, yo, D.
As you do.
Well, that's what I call her D. Is I say, yo, D. What exactly about I'm Coming Out did you not like? Just explain it to me, because I remember the drama at the time. It was crazy. So I said, just me and you now. It's just you and me. It's, no problem. And she looks at me, swear to God, what are you talking about, Nile? I love that song. I said, no, D, I know you love it now. I've been to your shows. I get it. I go to the show. I'm sitting in the audience. You go, ladies and gentlemen, this, that, Nile Rodgers. Come on up here and play it. I get it. I got them down. But what about then? I always love it. No, Diana. We went to court. It's a matter of public record. We sued each other. We're fighting. We can't rewrite history. We're in court. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Nile Rodgers, Chic organization. Diana Ross. It's there. I loved it. So she never. I don't think she remembers not liking it. I don't think she remembers us going to court or anything. She loves it. So I will never understand why why they had a problem with it, but she really loves it now, and I love it, and I knew it was the right thing. This is the beginning of the Diana Ross show for the rest of her life, and I'm really proud. I mean, it was always supposed to be not for the rest of her life; it was just that one album, but that's what we expected. That her, in the old days, when you went to see a live show, you basically saw you heard songs that you didn't know, and you waited for the end of the show, and then you hear the 4 or 5 hits that you knew. But the cool thing is that in the old days, we went to see live music to learn about new stuff. That was a place to deliver new music to the audience, and you see if it got over with the crowd, that was the record that was the song you're gonna put on your record, or you change the arrangements and see which version they responded to. My old band, we were on tour with the Jackson 5 when they were working out Dancing Machine on the road. And we were like, woo! I mean, it was like, you knew that was going to be a monster. So that's how it was back in the day. So when we wrote this song for Diana, her new show would have started with I'm Coming Out. She would have played almost everything from the new album that she wanted to play, and then the rest of the show would be Baby Love, Come See About Me, blah 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 blah, and all the Supreme stuff. And then and she probably hit with Love Hangover, whatever. But that's how we envision that album.
Now, I'm under really strict. I could do this all
Yeah,
day,
I know,
but I'm under
gotta
really
speed
strict
up, I'm
orders that
sorry.
I've only got we've got maximum another sort of 15, 20. So I think the best way to introduce the next sort of musical relationship that I want to talk about is just by playing undoubtedly one of the greatest grooves in popular music, and certainly one of the best pop records ever recorded. David Bowie famously once said, Nile Rodgers is the only person that could ever get me to sing a chorus straight away in a record.
Right. It's funny that he said that, because I always thought, yeah, he's right. I guess Rebel Rebel just starts with the lick, but he doesn't start off singing Rebel Rebel, right? I got your boy. He's right. Yeah. When we did this, sorry, I started tearing there when I heard Stevie Ray. When we did this record, a lot of people don't understand that David Bowie didn't even have a record deal. He was between record labels. I had just finished my first solo album, which I knew was not going to be a hit. I didn't think it was not going to be a hit when I was working on it. I thought it was really great and innovative. But David came to my apartment one day, and we listened to the test pressing. And just to show you how the two different minds think, and how his world is one way and my world is another. After we sat down and we listened to my solo record, 100% true. And I'm saying it, and I'm on tape now, so I'm stuck. I'll be like Diana Ross. David will say, "But you said it on tape." And the truth is that after we played my solo album, because the test pressings came in while he and I were conceiving Let's Dance, and we played the record, and I was all thrilled to hear it. And as soon as it finished playing, as soon as the vinyl finished playing, I got really depressed, because I knew I didn't have a hit, because in America, the only avenue that's open to me is black radio. And my record was so not black radio. And by then, the DJ culture had really been co-opted into the industry. So I didn't even have any DJ. I had a few, Larry Levant, and there were a few guys who would play my stuff, and actually wound up getting people on the dance floor playing which was amazing to me, because I was trying to run away from the whole disco thing, which I didn't even understand, because Chic wasn't a disco group. We were an R&B group. So I kept thinking, if I do anything like me, I'm going to be considered disco. So I had to do something drastically different. But when I played the test pressing, here's David Bowie's exact thing he said after we finished playing the record. He says, "Nile, darling, if you make a record for me half as good as that, I'll be the happiest man in the world." I was shocked, because my album, it was clear to me on the spot that I had messed up and did not make a commercial black record. and I was not going to be able to go to the rock stations. You know, when we finished the song called Why by Carly Simon, the rock radio station showed me exactly what I wasn't going to be able to do. I tried to play that record on the most popular rock station in America, and I was the guest DJ, and they wouldn't allow me to play it because it was like a dancehall reggae kind of record before dancehall reggae was dancehall reggae. The only song I had heard before that was Pass the Dutchie, and we tried to imitate something like that our own way. And I bought a drum machine and like, here, let's check it. This out, boom, 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 fop, boom, 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 fop. And they were like, we don't play that on our rock station. So I became aware of the politics slowly but surely, and it really started to sting. But when Bowie heard my record, he thought it was amazing. He thought it was like, wow, this is great stuff. And then it was really clear to me that the black world and the white world, no matter what I had achieved, I still was fighting the exact same battle as the day I walked into the record company. So now that I was with Bowie, I had a chance to go from being a disco producer, if you will, to just being a producer, which is all I wanted to be, was a producer. And when David and I agreed to do this record and also agreed on the direction, the DNA, or the DHM of this album, David, he can talk in very sort of abstract terms, but the great thing about David is that abstract language is the same language my parents spoke. It's the same language all sort of cool jazz people speak, and all artists. They can just talk about stuff like I'm doing now. We can just talk about stuff and you know what the person means. So when David and I were doing tons and tons of pre-promotion on the album that would become Let's Dance, after we did all of this research, David summed up rock and roll, or what this album was going to be, by a picture that he found of Little Richard getting into a Cadillac. And Little Richard was getting into this red drop-top Cadillac and had his do like that. And he was wearing a red suit, red Cadillac, and bam, had the pump. And David held it up and he says, nah, that's rock and roll. And he just showed me that picture. And I was like, I got it, man. I got it. And we started making this record, which, believe it or not, took 17 days from start to mix done. After the 18th day, there was a bunch of people sitting in a recording studio like this listening to it. The 19th day, Nile was out getting drunk. The 20th day, Nile was out getting drunk. The 21st day, we never touched this record again. It was done in 17 days, mixed, delivered. Stevie Ray Vaughan, Bowie, all those solos, everything done. And I think that this record, almost more than anything, captures that thing, that enigmatic thing called rock and roll, which is R&B at its roots, right? It's R&B. It's black music. It's R&B. I mean, that's what rock and roll was. It changed and all of a sudden became like different. But that's that Little Richard picture. That's what that record is. It starts with the Isley Brothers twist and shout with that thing singing the dominant 7 chord. I mean, that's that. Even the Beatles copied. I mean, that was it. So it gave us everything. The horn lick is a ripoff, a direct ripoff from another record. I get passionate about this stuff because I feel this world going away, and maybe it should go away. I mean, that's it's what they call progress. But this is what I grew up with, and when I got with Bowie, he allowed me to be that dude. And before that, I hadn't had that. Just like with the Diana record, as revolutionary as it sounded to Motown, I understand why it was revolutionary, because we were pushing the boundaries, because, shit, we had Diana Ross. We could do that with Diana Ross. We couldn't do it with Chic, but we could do it with Diana. I could do this with Bowie. I couldn't do it with Chic. When you think about this record and you talk about rock and roll and everybody is like, the musicians are anti this and that and that. And I was like, guys, what are you talking about? Everybody on that record, the rhythm section, it's all black and Puerto Rican people playing Bowie's biggest rock and roll record. Bowie was so keen on that Little Richard thing and the essence of rock. It was, this is natural. This is the world I want to live in. And that's the world I always thought that I'd join when I got signed to a record deal. I was like, it's like the UN. It's like we're all cool, and that's why I had that revelation last night. And I thought, man, if every world leader had to play an instrument or sing and then was forced to jam before you had a meeting, think about how much respect you'd have. All these little affinity groups who's like, damn, that's solo. How'd you learn it? Who's your favorite person? All right, we'll get to the budget later. But man, so do you think the Supremes? I mean, tell the truth. Do you really like the first Village People record? Yes. All of that would go on because when you play music, that all becomes revealed. You know, you start jamming with people and you hear their influences. You hear who they love and who they copy. You know, who would have known that Johnny Marr was like this serious Chic fan? Like, I knew because he named his kid. But so anyway, I'm sorry, bro. I know we have a limited time, but I just want to point that out.
We do have to open it up to the floor in a second. I mean, we should, of course, mention that you went on to work with Duran Duran, Madonna, and those records. I mean, like Wild Boys and Notorious are records you should definitely. I mean, I don't know if we've got time to play them now. But
we probably don't, and I'd love to hear from people because when I used to go to these type of things, I always wanted to learn something. So I'm just rambling. I spit this out. You can hit me on, on my website. You can hit me on Twitter. I can ramble on Twitter, boy. I use those 140. So we can do that. So I'd love to hear some personal questions if you don't mind.
I've been told by the bosses that we're allowed 3 questions only because Niall has to head off. So
5. He just upped it to 5.
No, I think it's participants only, or of course Niall's band. Just wait for the mic.
But he's in my band. He could ask me this anytime. But okay,
no.
You can ask me this back in the room, bro.
Yeah, but I want to answer Shed. You mentioned earlier when you were doing Everybody Dance, and you mentioned it, but then we kind of went away from it. You said that you were chucking, and Bernard geniusly came up with the idea, and then we never came back for the bass line. Did you give it to him, or what did he change that you said was genius?
Well, what happened was basically the original bass line that I wrote, if you will, was he was playing my original Chuck, which I sort of just skated over a little bit, was the clavinet part that comes up later in the song. When I originally wrote Everybody Dance, I was playing. It's like what we do live now in the live show. After we break down, we go to my original Chuck. Just 'cause I'm dying to play it after all these years. Okay. So that's what I originally wrote. I wrote. So Bernard's bass line was going. And I knew he could play it. So we were just hanging. We were going, and just to give you guys a little history, which some of you may not get, probably most of you won't get, or you may not care. But there was a really big record that we used to love in the early disco days called Sugar Pie Guy by a band called the Joneses, and the record used to start off with yes, boop 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 boop. Boop 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 boop. Yeah. Boop boop boop. Yeah. Boop. So all the bass lines that we used to do in the old days would go boom 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 boom. Boom, 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 boom. That's why you always hear Bernard going boom, 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 boom. We were always doing that Joneses thing. So in between sets, we used to always make fun and go, yes, boom. So that's what it was. So my original thing was boom, 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 boom.
Oh, okay.
So when he started playing that, and we both were doing it, it sounded really crowded, but we loved it. Niall loved it. And then he went against me. And it made it really crowded. So I'm doing that Chuck, which was ridiculous. Then he was playing against me. And then I just ceded to his bass line because it was so genius compared to the original thing that I wrote. And that's why it came out into that thing. So it just felt to me we were showing off. As a matter of fact, it was hard for us to get record producers when we first started, because whenever a record producer would come into the studio with us, once Bernard and I started chucking, usually those record producers were keyboard players, and man, it would sound like a fusion battle. It was like, and everybody, I ain't gonna mention any names because they're my boys now, but they would just start competing with us. So we're chucking and they're chucking, and next thing you know, like, where the hell is the song? Everybody's So that's why Chic Records famously, unfortunately, restrict the keyboard players, and they're just playing bum, gone, gone, diddle-diddle, gone. So me and Bernard can go. But you know, that's what worked for us, and that was the sound of our groove.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
How you doing?
Yeah.
Coming up, you work with a lot of artists. I just wanted to know if there was maybe any artists, you know, in like the '80s that you really wanted to work with that you didn't get a chance to, if you can recall.
I think the only person that I regret not working with was Miles Davis, because we became really good friends for a minute. We did a photo session together, and now in retrospect, I believe. As a matter of fact, I know he was telling the truth. What happened is that Miles and I became friends, and he asked me to write some songs for him, and I tried it, and the songs that I wrote were these sort of avant-garde, new agey jazz songs that he already does, and he used to say to me all the time, "Damn, now I can do that. Marcus can do that. I want you to write a motherfucking Good Times. Give me a motherfucking Good Times." And I felt so uncomfortable because I thought he was going to make fun of me. I thought he was just setting me up for a joke. And I thought I'd sit there and write it. And Miles would go, "You think Miles Davis would play that?" But he was dead serious. Dead serious. And I only realize it now when I go back and look at some of the records that he was trying to do that didn't work. He was looking for a motherfucking Good Times. And I felt weird, and after Miles and I became buddies, which we were like partying, you know, we hung out and partied and stuff like that. We never did any music, and once again, it was like David, that he could speak in abstract terms, but I didn't really believe he was telling the truth. And that's the one thing, is that I'll go to my grave regretting that I never did that record, because it would have probably been amazing. Because once he would have made me believe, just like Bowie made me believe, after you know the whole process we went through, and he showed me that Little Richard picture. If Miles had come in and slapped down the Good Times 12-inch and said, "Man, give me that," of course I wouldn't have done that. I would have done Miles Davis' version of that. Of course we didn't do Little Richard. We did David Bowie's version of Little Richard. But I just didn't believe it, man. And I actually, I don't lament many things, but I actually feel bad about that, because that's something that I don't feel like, you know, I want to have another notch in my belt to say, you know, I got another hit and I got a hit with Miles. It's artistically, there's something missing from my life, and that would have filled that one thing in, to have a viable jazz artist, like a revolutionary jazz artist. And matter of fact, what if I could have given Miles like his biggest record? You know, it would have been like unbelievable to me. That's it. You know, a person like Prince is like my friend, and I love him, and we've played together live and stuff, and that's good enough for me. Yeah, I'd probably like to make a record with Prince, but I'm not sure what that would be. I don't know how we would do that, but I certainly know it's like the thing about the world leaders. I know how to pick up a guitar and go jam with him. I know how to do that.
Any more very short or quick questions?
Yeah.
Participants.
All right. Come on, somebody. Somebody in the back. Who is that? Who are you pointing at, Rich? Oh, okay, yeah. Can we give a mic? Or just speak up.
Stevie Ray Vaughan. Can you talk about the first time you heard him play and your relationship with him?
Yeah, I really go over it a little bit more in depth in my book, which everyone in this room should get, by the way. It's a great book. Hold it up. The first time I met Stevie Ray Vaughan was just like Sister Sledge, was in the studio. He came into the studio. Remember how earlier I said that I'm responsible for the food as a record producer? So Stevie Ray Vaughan comes into the studio. David is making this album on his own dime, right? He's paying for everything, so that we don't waste time and take too long of a break. all the musicians order their food at the beginning of the day so that when we take our break, we can just eat our food and then go back to recording. So the first day Stevie Ray walks in, we're all putting in our orders, and Stevie says, no, I'll treat everybody to food tomorrow. And he calls a barbecue joint down in Texas and has the food, Federal Express or whatever they had, whatever service they had at that time, and had it sent to the recording studio the next day. And I thought, man, this dude is the real deal. I think it was called Sam's Barbecue, and it came from Texas. And for many years to come, we had the calendar hung up on the wall in the power station. And Stevie was incredible. He was so real. And for a person of his virtuosity, you never met a more humble person. And this guy was like ridiculous. There's only a handful of people that can play like him. But I don't know if you remember, I mean, I'm not sure, Rich, if you were around when Stevie Ray had to go do a gig with the Isley Brothers. And he was terrified because at that time, the Isley Brothers said, "Who's that lady out?" and stuff like that. My man was like, and he was like, "Oh man, I got to go play with them." And I was like, "Going, Stevie, trust me, you're gonna be fine, man. You're gonna be cool. You can hang. And he was not being, fake humble. He was like that. When we made the album Family Style, which is his only recording with his brother, which he never got a chance to hear because he died before we finished. I cannot tell you how charming, how sweet, how genuinely magnanimous and giving he was. He was so open to learning. When we were doing songs like Long, Long Way From Home, remember that with the flashcards and stuff like that, going to different keys, and he was so amazed that we recorded his guitar track, and then we had sampled it into the synclavier, and I think either Rich played a note or I played a note, and Steve went, "Whoa, what was that?" I was like, "That's your guitar solo." "Holy cow, I can move it from here to here." I was like, "Whoa, man." And it's just like, he was like a child who was a genius. It was just that, I can't say enough great stuff about him because there's only a handful of people that I've ever met in my life that have been that incredible and that cool. So,
I'm just curious about your guys' actual tracking process in Chic, because it sounds like you're sitting in the room with the band when you hear it back. And was it all one take? Like, it just versus other disco, I just feel like I'm sitting in the room with you guys, and I don't know. It's just
that's why there aren't any. There are very few alternate Chic takes. There's a famous quote I put in here with Madonna, who used to always say, "Time is money, and the money is mine." In those days, tape cost money. We were always concerned about stuff. So when we would get the song right, that was it. It was done. And usually it was right the first or the second time. Maybe there's third times. You can see later on in our career, because I retrieved all the tapes. I have every Chic recording now, more or less. And we look at it, there's only a handful of alternate takes because we didn't need them. We did it right. And also, we never used any metronomes either. Everything is all free played. And the only time we started to use anything like a metronome or a clocking device was when I did that first record with Carly Simon. But that was already now after the whole disco sucks thing. So it's funny that after they said we were a disco band and that we sucked, then we decided to use a drum machine.
do you think the digital recording, you can't get that thickness like you guys had with analog? Do you think that's why some of the stuff is being lost?
Well, the thing is that things are different because as artists, what we do is we always strive to, probably as human beings, we always strive to do what feels natural. The thing that feels like, the thing that tastes like sugar is the thing that you're going to like the best. So no matter how many artificial sweeteners they have, what you're trying to do is get back to sugar. So whatever sounds like natural music in our ears, that's what we're going to try and get back to. So the very first digital recording that I did, or let's say the first big digital recording was Madonna. And we were trying to get back to the analog sound. We loved the convenience of using the Sony, But our ears wouldn't allow us to accept that. So we kept, working with different outboard gear. I discovered early on that the D to A converters in the Sony consumer stuff sounded better than the professional stuff. So I actually recorded my first solo album on a bunch of consumer digital products and stuff, and then we transfer. I mean, it was all this crazy stuff because we're just trying to get back to the world that we naturally live in. We're trying to get back to sound that sounds the way that we're accustomed to hearing, and everything else feels like an irritant, but we're cool because it's still something organic and it's grooving and fundamentally hip. And then what's happened is that now we've gotten accustomed to hearing tone-generated bass drum and stuff like that. So it actually it's starting to feel more natural to us, even though it does hurt you. You can feel it, but I mean, believe me, I walk into a club and I hear that, and I'm same thing, right away. So I won't say that there's anything lost. If anything, there's just more, because the old doesn't go away. It's just, it's just more stuff. And as I said, I believe in progress. Sure, it's romantic. When Rich and I, when we did Coming to America, we went into the vault and they played us, Elvis recordings on 3 tracks. You never heard anything like that. I mean, the heads were like that big and it sounded incredible. But, no one wants to go back to that. But it sounds better than anything I've ever heard. Thank you. Did everybody?
We got time for one.
Yeah.
More
Did everybody say something? I mean, like I said, I
One
want you
more
to learn
participant.
something.
Anyone else?
What do you mean about my video game stuff? What about it? What's that question? I don't know what the question is. Let's this dude, or unless they should give me a very specific question.
Hey, I want to talk a little bit about the disco sucks thing. I know you didn't consider Chic a disco band, but largely the population did. They associated you directly with it. How did that make you feel as an artist? And also, having these huge hits under your belt afterwards, was that like a form of retribution for that? Like having the people that hated on it really love that David Bowie record.
I don't know if I thought about it clinically like that. I just thought that, if you notice, the great thing about Bowie is that he righted the ship almost. He put me back on the course, because what David said, what I didn't get a chance to share with you, was David told me after we fooled around with some different stuff. Actually, no, it was that same day when I played my solo record, and he told me if I did a record half as good, not better or as good, half as good, he'd be the happiest man in the world. He told me in that same session that he wanted me to do what I did best. And I said, well, really, what's that? He says, I want you to do hits. And I said, that's what you think I do best? I was thinking to myself, I probably have more flops than I have hits, which proves that I could do flops better than hits. But really, I was hoping that David would, help me achieve the status of just being considered a producer, and hopefully a good producer. And once he told me that he wanted me to do hits, here's what David did for me. He forced me to, as I said, when I defined myself as a producer, my role is to serve the project. He told me, make hits. That's it. That's what your job is. Make hits, Nile Rodgers. Make hits, because that's what you do best. We had 4 hit singles on that album. And and some of those were remakes. Imagine making a hit out of a song that wasn't a hit. And, and people are looking at it like, you're defiling the gods of rock, You're doing an Iggy Pop song and it's corny. And I'm like, yeah, but we just sold 2 million of those corny records.
So there's a lot of aspiring producers and instrumentalists, singers, musicians in the room. If there was one thing you could leave us with from all of that experience, what would it be?
I actually think I said it earlier, and I'll reiterate that if you want to be in this business, right, the business, make sure that the first thing that you commit to, it's almost like a prayer or a mantra, make sure that you really love it. that the biggest reward that you get is like, when we were playing those songs back and I was listening, going, oh right, yeah, that's right. That's the Hammond B3 from the from the room that we wheeled in on Let's Dance, right? Because at first we weren't going to add it, and then at the end, Bowie said, oh, is that a B3 over there? And we wheeled it in and put it on it. Make sure that you love doing this just for the sake of doing it, because that's your greatest reward. If you have a blast doing this, then if you get a record deal, and then if you get a hit, oh my God, that's incredible, because that ain't the real world, man. You chances are you're not going to get signed to a real label, and you're not going to get a hit record. But if you do happen to get one, all the more fantastic and wonderful, because the truth is that I have just as much fun playing my little jazz Epiphone in my bed every night than I do being in the studio with Bowie. It's a different experience, but it feels exactly the same to me to toil over some jazz songs that I used to play with my eyes closed 35 years ago. It feels exactly the same to me today, and I love it. And it's not just because of having close calls with death or any of that stuff. I've never changed. I've been like this since the moment I became what I call a musician. Just to share with you, to put a finer point on it, a few weeks ago we did a show, and we had Valerie Simpson perform with us, and this was just a few days after her husband Nick Ashford had died. And Valerie was one of the first people to recognize Bernard and I as viable producers, and she says that a girl had come over to her nightclub, which she has in New York, and she has these open mic things, and it's really popular. And she says a girl cornered her the other day and said, Valerie, I really want to become a singer. I want to become a singer. And she says, oh, great, sweetie, that's fantastic. She says, well, can you sing? Do you have the ability to sing? Can you carry a tune? And she says, oh, yeah. I can sing. I sing pretty well. She says, oh, well, wait a minute. I thought you said you wanted to become a singer. She says, yeah, I do. I really want to become a singer. She said, well, sing for me. And the girl sang, and she sounded good. And Valerie says, wow, but you are a singer. And she said, no, but I want to become a real singer. And then Valerie stopped and said, oh, you want to become famous? And she says, yeah. She says, oh, well, that's different. I don't know how to do that. I know how to be a singer. I know how you can become a singer, and you already are a singer. She says, go home and sing and sing and sing, and if you want to be famous, then keep trying to be famous and figure out your way of making it, because you sound great and you're already terrific. She was trying to explain to this girl, you have a gift. Be happy, because not many people can sing and not many people sound great. But she could see that woman had it distorted, that she was defining a singer as being famous, and that's not the case. I mean, so I agree with Valerie. Make sure you love it, because I love it. I mean, why do you think I still do this? I don't have to do this. I'm out there because I love doing it. I mean, last night was one of the funnest nights I've had in 30 hours, because the night before was really fun. And 2 nights before that was really fun, and tomorrow is going to be fun.
Well, on that note, I'd just like to say it's been a great privilege, and on behalf of everyone in the room, please join me in thanking Mr. Nile Rodgers.
Thank you.